Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome members and officers to this Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting and welcome anyone watching online. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to explain how proceedings will work.
Good evening. Rules of debate. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. The normal procedure rules in respect to debate and times to speak will apply. When requested to vote, voting will be by the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room and the result will be visible on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the chair will have the casting vote. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? Nope. I will hand back to the chair.
Thank you. Apologies for absence have been received from councillors Cathy Brown-John and Dominic Griffiths. Are there any further apologies? No? Thank you. So item 2, the minutes of the meeting of the 10th of June. I propose that we take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of June. May I have a seconder? Thank you, John.
Yep, happy to second. Happy to second.
Any comments? So we can go to the vote.
That motion is carried, Chair. Thank you.
Item 3, notification of other business. We have no other business been notified, which brings us to number 4, the Chair's announcements. In accordance with Council policy, this meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The recording will be available on the Council's YouTube channel as well as on the Council's MudGov site alongside the documents from this meeting. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. And for the purposes of clarification, 4.8.23a of the Constitution does not apply to this meeting. Therefore, a member may leave the room during the debate and consideration of that item and still be able to vote. However, please do be mindful of the business on the agenda and wherever possible, leave it at an appropriate point in the proceedings. And finally, members are reminded that we have adopted a scrutiny charter, which outlines how we conduct scrutiny at North Herts Council, including the need for independence, initiative and integrity. It's important that all members are mindful of this in how they approach the items on the agenda tonight and at all future meetings. Full details on the adopted charter can be found on the Council's intranet page for members. Item 5, public participation. There is no public participation at this meeting. Item 6, there are no urgent or general exception items. Item 7, no items have been called in. And item 8, no questions from members have been received. Thank you. So that brings us to item number 9 and the Council Delivery Plan Q1 update for 25-26. And can I pass now to Councillor Ian Albert to present?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks obviously to the committee here, because I think that's probably those of you on the committee last year. There was a considerable amount of input from the committee on the format of the plan and questions around the plan. So hopefully now, I think we're all getting used to the fact that the Council Delivery Plan covers all of the Council's key projects, including milestones and risks of delivery. It also includes our key performance indicators and overarching risks that could affect project delivery. Cabinet used this report for an oversight of where everything has got to, and we really do value the scrutiny, as I mentioned just now, provided by this committee. In response to the peer review and the subsequent audit, we're looking at how we can extend our KPIs to have a focus on how we're doing at achieving the outcomes contained within our council plan. This will form part of the Q2 report, and we need to look at where we can have smart measures that aren't a burden to measure, particularly with all the work going on LGR and other issues at the moment. I'm going to hand over to Ian Cooper to provide you a little bit more detail about the report, but we'll very much welcome questions later on after Ian's concluded. So over, if I can, if you're agreeable, Chair, to hand over to Mr. Cooper for just to pick up a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Albert. So picking up on what's contained in the summary of the report, there are two projects that have an amber delivery status, which are digital transformation and leisure centre decarbonisation. Just to remind you, an amber status means that one or more milestone dates have been missed, but there's no significant overall project impact on the delivery. In the appendix, again as a reminder, changes to milestones and new milestones, which are both subject to Cabinet approval, highlighted in yellow and blue respectively. 4 projects have a red risk status, which are leisure centre decarbonisation, decarbonisation phase 2, Churchgate and the local plan review. All the overarching corporate risks are also red status in terms of risks. This means they have both a high score on both the likelihood and the impact of those risks, which means they get a higher level of monitoring and review in terms of how we look at them. There are 3 KPIs that have a red status, 2 relating to Careline installations, which are new ones, and the other relating to CSC calls answered in 45 seconds. Explanations and planned actions are picked up in paragraph 8.4 of the report. As an update, the performance indicator against revenue budget KPI, which is missing in the report you received for Q1, is plus 2.4%. As mentioned by Councillor Albert, we have to pick up any questions. Obviously, there's a lot of detail in the report, so welcome any questions on any areas you want to dig into.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Councillor Clayton.
Can kick us off, perhaps. With regards to the 2 KPIs relating to Careline that we're some way back on, those are new KPIs introduced earlier this year. Do we think, given how things are going on those 2, that those are the right KPIs?
Yeah, I think that looking at the actions that are in place to address them, it is down to a resourcing issue. So I think they're the right things to be measuring. Obviously, introduce them and have poor performance against them is not a great start, but I think there's actions in place to address that. So I think once resources are in place, I think it's something that's worth measuring, and hopefully we can get performance back to that sort of green level rather than being the red level.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the KPIs, page 26, I think it was, 25, 26, around there. I just noticed some of them, I can understand why we want to track a few things that don't have targets, because we just want to know. But I was just wondering what the comments around 2 or 3 of them say sort of not measured for years. What is that? And is that does that mean, to your point, I think we should not bother with this anymore in terms of saving a bit of time producing it, or does that just mean it's one that we're just not bothered in the target for, but we still want to pay attention to it? So, for example, I'm just thinking, so they're like, if you look at page 26, you've got the working days one at the top, and then the third one down as well to staff turnover.
Yeah, I think I might have to say more in that box. I think it's supposed to say more than that. I think they're worth measuring in terms of if they do go very high, they are a problem. Particularly the short-term absence. That one has got a target of 4 and above that target. So yeah, let me go back on particularly on both of them have targets. So I need to go back on those and work out why that comment's in there. I think it's probably should say more, and it's kind of got cut off. So let me come back to committee by email after the meeting and confirm what I was supposed to say. And we'll make sure it's addressed in the cabinet version as well. But we have measured those over a long period of time, and we do have targets for them. So I think it's an error rather than anything they're trying to make, any statement we're trying to make about the validity of those KPIs.
Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the leisure centre decarbonisation write-up on the council delivery plan, obviously there's been some minor slippage on sign-off and delivery due to, I would submit, and I don't know if you'll agree with me or if colleagues will agree with me, circumstances beyond this council's control in respect of new legislation. Is there a knock-on financial impact as a result of the Building Safety Act issue that's noted?
No, we're not expecting any financial implication from that.
And while we're on the topic of leisure centres, perhaps this is something for Councillor Albert to take away ahead of budget workshop season, etc. But reflecting back to last year's budget on leisure centres, there was reference to ensuring we had funding set aside for the business case at Royston Leisure Centre for the learner pool, which was a casualty as a result of decarbonisation. I was wondering if you've got any update for Scrutiny on that.
I haven't got an update tonight. I was asking for an update it's funny enough the other day about that, but I will follow up on that. I think that is as I committed to at the time, that is a really important piece of work, and we want to have that in time for the budget workshops, in order that we can actually, and all councillors from all cross party can look at the business case, or indeed the likely costs of a leisure pool a learner pool in Royston, and we can then take some decisions, I think, based on updated information that we didn't have previously. So very happy to pursue the obviously my colleague in cabinet and the service director about that issue, certainly.
Thank you. Councillor Clayton.
Thank you. So just following up on Councillor Dennis's comments about the leisure centre decarbonisation project, I've got a couple of queries about that. One is that it seems that the commencement and the completion of decarbonisation works at Hitchin specifically appear as two separate milestones, whereas all the others only have a completion milestone. I'm not quite sure why that is. And with regards to feeding back to Salix, the milestone reads, this is page 30, sorry, the milestone reads, provide Salix with finalised project data, and the timeline is the 2nd of February. But by my reading, at least one, probably two of the sites won't be done by then. So how are we going to provide that data if we haven't actually finished the work at that point? Actually, I have a third question about this, which is in the risk section, it says demand on existing officer resources to cover the loss of the dedicated project manager. I wonder whether you could comment on the loss of the project manager and how that's come about and what effect that has on the project. Sorry to combine three questions into one.
So in relation to the first point around the commencements and the end dates, I thought there were commencement dates on all of them. Some are on the first page, but maybe I'm missing them.
Oh, yes, sorry. One of them's highlighted.
Yeah, so the yellow ones have changed in deadline. So there has been changed the start date of the start of the works at Hitchin, which is why it's highlighted a different colour. But I think they are all on there. In terms of the Salix project data, there are works that will be happening that I guess don't have a direct climate impact, but are ancillary works. And I think some of those, and certainly some of the completion bits around some of the Building Safety Act stuff, can take place after the physical works have completed. So I think it is possible to do that Salix information before we've necessarily completed every single bit of the works bit, and say all the kind of this ancillary bits on top of that. So I think that's part of the reason for that date difference there, and that can be achieved. And I think the key date there is the end of the financial year of by 31st of March, by the end of the year. So I think that's fine in terms of that respect on that one. And the project management resource, the last one, is that right? So he was a joint post with East Herts, and we sort of bought some of his time. His circumstances at East Herts changed, so he decided to leave. That's what effectively happened, being able to access that support at that time. I think where he got to the project by that point means that we can now carry on without that same level of support, albeit that we are buying some of that support we would have had from him through one of the contractors that have been involved in sort of the quantity surveyor side of the project. So it's being covered, and it has sort of, from moving to the kind of project setup into construction phase, a lot more of the work now sits with the constructor rather than with us to do some of that project management work.
I have a question, if I may, and I'd just like to, and it probably, yeah, well, could you kindly expand on how the risks are numerated? What makes something a 5 and an 8, and what's the process? Because some of them seem to me to be risks that will have more impact on residents than others, and yet they have quite low scores. Whereas obviously the corporate risks are quite high. What do you use to define those risks?
So on page 22 of the pack, you've got a tiny little grid there, which kind of might help a little bit in the answer to that. So we assess both the likelihood and the impact. So one's, and you kind of go from low, medium, high across one side and low, medium, high across the other side. So high impact and high likelihood scores a 9, medium on both scores a 5, and then another example, low on both scores a 1 on that matrix. So that's kind of gives a score. The assessment of whether it's low, medium, or high against both of those is somewhat down to judgment. It's not just about the impact on residents. There'll be a much wider consideration around impacts on the council more specifically, including financial risks, legal risks, and lots of other risks as well. The likelihood is, but they're both very subjective, but it's the officer who's kind of closest to that risk who will come up with that judgment. And then, yeah, I guess it's for cabinet and scrutiny as well. If they disagree with any of the risk assessment, we can have a look back at it as well. And equally, Finance Audit and Risk Committee also look at the kind of mechanisms for our risk management process as well. So they have insight into what that process as well.
Page 36, the prioritising our pounds project. I just noticed the commentary around the delay to the milestone that's highlighted in yellow. Is that, I know we discussed this, I think, end of last week, Ian and Ian around the resources update. Has that now changed? So the MTFS will be doing that in December, not November. Is that right?
I guess that's the date for it to go to council. So that'll be the council date we're looking at. I think that's the 4th of December, I think. But if that's wrong, I'll correct it. So it'll be produced in November to go for the cycle via Finance Audit and Risk Committee, Cabinet, and then council.
Should I just sort of come back on one other thing on your question, because I think there is a sort of standing invite to members of FAR and this committee to the quarterly resource and performance management group. It's a daytime meeting, unfortunately, so I appreciate that lots of people won't be able to attend it, but that's obviously where a lot of those sort of risks are floated, highlighted, raised in the first place as they then work their way through the system. So if anyone here is interested in coming along to one of those meetings, let Ian know. I think it's a standing invite that you have, yeah. But appreciate it's a daytime meeting, so it might be difficult for many.
Any more questions? Councillor Clayton?
I'll keep coming until you stop me. On the some of the KPIs relating to waste, so collections missed, percentage of household waste sent for reuse, recycling and composting and so on. I think there's a note about the fact that we haven't got up-to-date data on that. So I just wondered whether that's because of a difficulty in collecting data from Veolia or something else, and whether there are any kind of indications of how those things might be looking in the absence of hard data since the start of the new contract.
Yeah, it's around both the contract change and service change and just capacity to do collecting data and all the other things. The data will be collected. The data is not lost. It is there. It's just our priorities at the moment. We'll obviously make sure that data is there. I don't know about if there's any anecdotal evidence about what those data numbers are going to be. So I just can't answer that one. Fair enough.
Any further questions? Thank you. Then the recommendations are that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee provide comment on the Council Delivery Plan Q1 monitoring report, including the recommendation to be made to Cabinet, which is that Cabinet note progress against Council projects and performance indicators as set out in the Council Delivery Plan at Appendix A, and approves new milestones and changes to milestones. And 2.2, determine any project they want to receive more detail on as part of the next monitoring report. So can I have a proposer and seconder for that? Proposer? Thank you, John.
Yeah, I'm happy to propose that we follow those recommendations.
Thank you. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Billing. So any further debate on that? Milestones, KPIs, Councillor Munster.
Thank you, Chair. I think at the next ONS meeting, it may be useful for members to receive an update with respect to the public sector decarbonisation scheme. We know that on a number of occasions there have been milestones of which have slipped, and of course costs have increased quite significantly since the initial estimation, and therefore it is probably best that we keep this one very close to our chest, and that we're very much keeping it under review to identify any potential issues at the very earliest opportunity.
Thank you. Now Councillor Chalmers, did you have some questions around Churchgate and Charnwood House you wanted to raise?
I did, but I've been. I did, but I've got a message coming back that they couldn't be answered tonight.
Well, we probably can answer them if you want to ask them. So I've now moved to the recommendations, haven't I?
That they could be asked, could they? Okay, right. I need to.
Can we ask them? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've missed that one.
Just let me find where they were. Sorry, where did I put that in? Sent items. There we are. Yeah, so I mean, so on Churchgate, the first point I wanted to ask was about the ongoing delays, lack of transparency in the redevelopment of the Churchgate Centre. Can the portfolio holder for resources provide information on the following? So it was basically how much NHDC has spent on the redevelopment to date, including a breakdown on consultants' fees. And then there's also a question I want to ask is why there's been little progress on addressing local concerns around housing, car parking and local amenities, such as what will happen to the market. And when can we expect a decision to be made and some actual building to take place? What are the overall forecasted costs for NHDC for completion of the project? And also what steps are being taken to ensure the project is delivered in a timely and effective manner with proper consultation of the community and stakeholders. And then on Charnwood, if you want, I'll ask the question. Do you want to respond on? Yeah, please. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll have a go. We'll have a go at Churchgate, and obviously we haven't got obviously the executive member here, obviously, but I'm a member of the project board, so I'm very happy to try and see if I can answer your questions to the Councillor Chalmers, and thanks for that. Firstly, I think it's right to say I'd probably very tentatively and nervously disagree with your opening premise, because I don't think that there has been the kind of lack of transparency and so on that you mentioned. Indeed, obviously, we've held regular briefings with councillors. That obviously some colleagues here would have been at those briefings, and there will be further briefings to come. So I don't accept that point, but let's turn to the detail. We can, because I think that's the key issue here. In answer to the first point, it's around what we've spent today, which has been largely around sort of contractor consultancy spend, is 296,000. Again, obviously, you'd asked about the sort of the progress and so on, and again, I don't agree that around that as a premise. I think we addressed many of these concerns through a very lengthy consultation process. We had over 3,000 responses, which did address those issues that you've mentioned. As part of the next phase to the project, approved at full council in July. Again, obviously with a briefing before it, the team are conducting a parking survey strategy that will review the current usage, what's available in the town, both private and North Herts Council owned, and a review of what improvements can be made within the town to better signpost or redirect shoppers, users to other available parking locations in the town. The overall survey and analysis will provide recommendations to the council on how parking should be addressed as part of this redevelopment in the best interest of the community. Public interviews to be held, and the council. And I think the key there is we absolutely accept the point that you make there, that obviously within any program or project, getting things like transport, car parking, and so on, and generally our high streets across the town, understand the impacts on doing something in Churchgate has on the rest of the town, and making sure we've got good movement across the town of pedestrians and people coming to the town is absolutely critical. In terms of the market board have been consulted with regularly as part of the consultation process from the very beginning, and that's been a really important part of this process. I've certainly sat in on some of those early meetings with your colleague, Councillor Hoskins, and we absolutely recognise the importance of working with our market traders and indeed our current Churchgate traders. As we move forward into the next phase, we're working with market specialists, a company called Market Curators, to determine how a future market might look and feel according what's the best fit for the town and its community. And clearly that will be a subject of further consultation. This will involve working with the current market and its traders, as well as the council. There are several packages of work that are being worked on at the moment in preparation for a full council report later in the year. That will take members and the public through the findings and plans for the next stage in the lead up to a full procurement exercise. All of the intelligence being gathered now will build, I believe, a real strong foundation of knowledge that will put us in a good position for pre-procurement. As has been mentioned, the team are planning on presenting the findings of the next phase at the full council in December. Depending on what procurement route we take, we're hopeful that the building work will begin certainly in either 2027 or by 2028. We clearly, there is a lot happening at the moment in terms of LGR and other issues. So clearly we need obviously to agree what is the right route before we can really sort of firm up actually what a building process would actually look like, because as I say, until you've actually decided on what the actual proposals are going to be and what we're going to go out to tender, clearly obviously to say when building will start taking place, I think would be optimistic, and I think risky certainly for me to sit here tonight and tell you that with any certainty. I think it's worthwhile saying that we've got a new project manager starting next week, following a recruitment exercise. She is highly experienced in dealing with projects of this kind, working with many different authorities, and has won awards for her work on this. And I think we are really looking forward to working with her and her being able to actually help us to drive this work forward, working with the existing team. And so I think the importance of the board running regularly, whereby reports, updates, deliverables, and any delays are highlighted. Clearly, obviously, I know you and others, I know Councillor Munster regularly asks questions about this, and I know that Scrutiny will want further reports and a detailed report. Obviously, Councillor Munster mentioned about the other project, but clearly you'll no doubt will want to discuss probably Churchgate before it comes to to full council. We have a number of project board workshops that we've held, and the project is also monitored via our internal audit, our shared audit service, via regular audits, with the next one being in January. Each audit focuses on the next phase, ensuring the team are held accountable and measures are in place to ensure the project is being effectively run. The latest audit report made 3 recommendations. There was 1 high priority, 1 low, 1 advisory. All these have been addressed within the agreed timescales. So as it stands, there isn't anything significant for the community to be consulted upon today. I give regular updates in my capacity as chair of the Hitchin Community Forum, and as I say, we meet regularly with the Hitchin Market Board to relay any further updates. So, but clearly going forward, there will be a further big engagement piece that will allow the community to have their say on the master plan, being led by developers. And I say finally, as I mentioned earlier, we've appointed that really experienced project manager to lead the project for the next year, and I'm sure that no doubt that you might want to talk to her when you at a future meeting, and no doubt she'll be happy to come along with the executive member for the project. So I think hopefully that kind of covers off at least some of the the points that you'd asked about David, and I'm but again, obviously more than happy to pick anything else up either this evening or outside of this meeting, because obviously the issues you raised are absolutely critical for making sure that we and the full council make the right decisions on this project for the town and for all the council, because whatever we do in Hitchin affects the whole of our area, and so it's not just a Hitchin issue. This is a North Herts issue, so it's really important that we get this right and make the right decision in the next few months about the next stage. So hopefully, Chair, that's helpful. But again, more than happy to try and pick anything further up this evening or outside of the meeting in writing.
Thank you, Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. In the absence of the portfolio holder, can I just have just 1 minute to say that we have tried very hard to make the whole process transparent to residents, and we have a new page on the hub which is called Churchgate Conversation, and that gives the back timeline and what's coming next and all the documents, so it's up to date. So I think it is worth looking at that. Thank you.
Appreciated. Councillor Munster.
Thank you, Chair. And I know sort of we're in the debate stage, but I think we've sort of gone into questions, so forgive me if it's all right if I ask some questions on this. I think Councillor Chambers has raised sort of a very, very important point here. And with respect to sort of the answer of which you just gave, Councillor Albert, thank you for that. It's really important that obviously this committee is understanding of what is going on with respect to Churchgate, because it is, of course, potentially going to be a large financial liability. And it's, again, one of those projects that we do need to keep very, very close eye on. Just with respect to market traders and local businesses, because I know, of course, we have undertaken a significant consultation with the local community. I know the results of which are currently being analysed by officers and by consultants, but just specifically with respect to sort of market traders and local businesses, because we are of the options of which were presented to us at the last full council meeting, effectively we are going to see a significant amount of car parking of which is removed. And I'm just sort of wondering, what engagement, specific engagement, have we had with the market traders, the local businesses, the bid, those of whom are involved in enterprise in the town of Hitchin, as to what they want to see with respect to this redevelopment, as well as sort of the concerns which they have, particularly as we're undertaking, or from your own account, Councillor Abbott, we're going to be appointing in the next couple of months a consultant to look particularly at the future of the market on this site.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Munson, for that. I mean, I think the important thing for me, and especially as someone who sat on the board, obviously, as a kind of Hitchin councillor, is that I mean, I talk regularly to the market traders, the market manager, and so on, the bid manager, indeed, obviously our new bid manager, around these issues, and clearly, obviously, that where you talk to businesses, obviously, always that car parking, and this isn't just about the numbers of spaces, as you know, it's about car parking charges, all these things that are always issues for that of where we absolutely consult with the bid, particularly through the bid, local businesses, and getting their views specifically, and obviously that's not just Hitchin, that's across the whole district where we've got bids in place. So getting that right and understanding what those views are, and that survey, that work that is being done, on the car parking strategy that I mentioned earlier on, will be a really key feature, I think, of any paper that comes to whether it's the scrutiny and to the full council, because I think there is absolutely there is a challenge there between that balance between getting the right number of car parking spaces, their locations, and obviously a new development in Churchgate, and of course recognising that as we know, that there is potential not insignificant house building going on both in Hitchin and in outside in central Bedfordshire, that we need to actually look, because this is a project that isn't about just for the next 5-10 years. It's for the long-term future of the town. So actually getting those things right now, and quick fixes now for some of these things are just going to actually give someone else a problem further down the track. So that is absolutely why we wanted to get that car parking paper there, and as part of the evidence that comes to the committee, and then clearly, obviously, it can be further consultation with public and elsewhere. But that will be a really important part of the evidence base here, that I think you can judge the project on, and then judge the options on as to whether they are practical, sensible, and sustainable for the future. And so I think I'm really hopeful that we'll get, once we've got that information, we'll all see, and I think can see, and it will be a challenge, I think, for all of us here, is actually then, is it getting that decision right? Do the options that are on the table meet the needs and meet the balance of what comes out of the evidence from that car parking strategy survey that's underway?
Thank you. Just a note, though, I apologise for messing up the order and going to the recommendations. I'm considering this to be still in the questions, as these days seem to be generating them. So I will come back. Can I just check, Councillor Ward, you're next on the list. Is there something about Churchgate specifically?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, let's take that one then, and then we'll come back to that then afterwards.
Thank you. Can I just check, just listening to the updates earlier on, there was a comment that the high priority audit finding had been closed on Churchgate. I was just reading the FAR report for tomorrow. It's saying that that's actually still open. It's been partially implemented, but they're waiting, audit are waiting an update from management on the complete closure of it and a new date, and there isn't a new date on it yet. So we don't have to tackle it now, but maybe we could pick that up in FAR tomorrow. I just wanted to make sure councillors had the right status. Is that correct?
Let me double check that. I was under the impression it had been completed, but I'll make sure everything's coordinated. So yeah, let me confirm that by writing into FAR tomorrow.
Thank you. Councillor Chalmers.
Yeah, and I thank you, Councillor Albert, for your explanation and for some of the points. There was just a couple of points that I wanted to come back on. Am I able to do that? Yeah. You mentioned the buildings sort of starting in 2027 and 2028, and how does that fit in with the sort of what was envisaged when this was started? And part of that is you also mentioned LGR, and those dates we're then sort of falling into the weeds of LGR. What are the concerns, and what are you actually implementing for the risk that this doesn't get sort of lost or held up with the changes that are coming forward? So those two related. Thank you.
I was just looking to see whether there's anything you wanted to add specifically around the LGR process, Anthony, or is it? Yeah, I mean, I think government have issued a letter, and I think Mr. Cooper will kind of confirm that clearly we'll come to a point in the future where if we are going to undertake significant financial commitments, that we will at the very least need to discuss with our future partners that whoever they might be, depending on the range of options that are out there on the table. It might be few or many, and that's obviously a debate for another for another day. So clearly we want to try and get this project moving forward in a way that actually that we are whilst obviously recognizing that clearly that inevitably that some of this work will take place in a post LGR world. We want to, I think, get to the point as North Herts Council where that we have agreed and reached firm decisions about the right way forward, and if need be, have consulted with any partners if that's our requirement. But I don't know whether, Anthony, you wanted to sort of really add anything from any of the perspectives of the different strands that have been discussed.
I can talk generally rather than in relation to any specific asset. I think I was having a catch up with Steve Crowley earlier, obviously the relevant service director. And one of the pieces of work that we're looking at is a review of our asset management strategy. And without LGR, we would just be looking at that in the context of, in very simple terms, what's the right thing for North Herts Council for each asset? That would broadly be the question we'd be asking ourselves. And the answer to that could vary wildly depending on what the asset is, what condition it's in, what the opportunities are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we're going to have to ask ourselves two questions. What's the right thing for North Herts? And what's the right thing for potential future authority? And when it comes to looking at our assets, there is another layer to it. So if I use the example of Letchworth Museum, it is adjacent to and overlaps with Letchworth Library, as we all know. One is owned by the district, one is owned by the county. Well, in future unitary world, the entire building, both bits of it, are owned by a single council, which potentially makes decisions around its future more straightforward. So when we are doing that asset review the review of the asset management strategy for North Herts, one of the things we'll be bearing in mind is, are there adjacent or nearby county assets that could change what we would otherwise look to do with something for North Herts? So those are the sorts of considerations we'll be doing anyway. There is a
work stream under LGR, and when I do my presentation later, you'll see it, which does look at assets, and Steve Crowley is our representative on that work stream. And that will be initially mapping all of the assets across Hertfordshire for all of the 11 authorities. And ultimately, one of the things it will be trying to figure out is how do you divide those assets between the new unitaries that get created. So hopefully that helps illustrate some of the work that's going on. It's an added layer of complication. And as Councillor Albert rightly said, once we get to a certain point in the process, there will be handcuffs placed on us as to what we can do as North Herts without the approval of the shadow authority that will succeed us. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is something I was going to say as part of the debate, but it might be better at this point. And I will just pull back from the detail that we've been looking at some of the specific projects and look at the overall project status and just ask whether we are comfortable with the amount of risk that we're seeing on those projects, with 1/3 of the projects with a risk level with a red risk level and only 3 at green. Is that something that we're comfortable with as an organisation? And do we have any timeframes around when we might see those things turn to amber and green? That is probably a question for, for Councillor Albert, I guess, and also the officers. So happy to take responses anywhere.
So obviously, in an ideal world, and I've been dealt with risk management over the years, both in government and now in local government, that you never want to see a red risk on a risk register. But equally, you recognise that there are projects that are at an early stage or still in a place where there is some degree of uncertainty about them, where inevitably that red risk will be there. But the is that you've got the clear mitigations and processes in place to carefully, closely manage that risk through, whether it's through scrutiny, through FAR, through the risk and performance management group I mentioned, clearly the senior leadership team and cabinet, in keeping, and that's what obviously this council delivery plan is for, is to both to surface and highlight where there are those risks, and that we've got processes in place in order to be able to manage that risk. And indeed, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we bring in the shared internal audit service to review that as well. And indeed, obviously, they attend at least one of the project board meetings to as a board member to provide their advice. So I think there is, am I comfortable? No, but of course, obviously, am I comfortable with the fact that we've got processes in place to manage those risks, and we know about them? We are not just forgetting about them. We've got day to day, month by month vision upon them through these reports, other reports, board meetings, and so on. That actually do manage those risks as an entirety. That I am comfortable, but clearly, we would want to make the progress, but there will be some things that are just, it is not possible to be anything other than maybe a red risk, because it is that very early stage of fruition. But we've got a process in place to actually manage it down over the course of the coming and up to the particular stage of the individual project.
Yeah, I mean, for the purpose of brevity in this report, we just have, these are the risks. What sits behind that is a load of mitigating actions and a load of completed actions against those. That is available on IdeaGen, so everyone has access to that. And for individual projects, we can provide that great detail either offline or for a specific meeting. So that's kind of what gives you some reassurance that those actions are there, and you can also track that they're actually happening.
and those mitigating actions they slowly eat away at the risk and makes it a little bit smaller each time. So eventually you can kind of move from a red over to amber and then to a green.
Thank you. Okay, so if we have any other questions, let's take those now. And then David, did you have a second half?
I had a question about Charnwood House. Can I take that now? Can I ask that now? Basically, Charnwood House in Hitchin. Can you clarify how much money has been invested in renovations of the building to date, and why there's been a lack of clear communication with the community about the council's plans for the property, and what concrete actions are being taken to ensure the building is either repurposed or developed in a way that benefits the local area rather than left to deteriorate further? Yeah, thank you.
Happy to try and pick that one up, David and Chair. So I think when you've obviously mentioned to date, you know, I mean, I could be picky about that, but I want to be helpful, because clearly, obviously, a lot of money has been spent on Charnwood over all the years that that the council has owned it in various forms. But what I wanted to specifically cover, I think, is the thing that I was really keen that we did, and again, it was Councillor Hoskins and I helped to put in place, which was the £400,000 fund to contribution towards the renovation of Charnwood as a community hub, because that is what this council, I think the previous joint administration and this administration were absolutely keen and remain committed to do. So there was some money spent just before that 400,000 in removing all the asbestos from the building. I think it was about 10,000. But in terms of the 400,000, the expenditure to date is 30,000 of that. So there's 370,000 approximately left. As I mentioned, that we had announced on the previous administration announced our ambition to revitalise Charnwood House for the benefit of Hitchin and the wider district. And they'll say we are absolutely committed to delivering this ambition. We had appointed external agents that were tasked with engaging potential operators for Charnwood House, envisaging it as a very lively community space, community hub. Previous work and marketing by external agents did not lead to a letting or other arrangement to bring it into suitable use for various reasons. And there was obviously another group, the Charnwood Association, that had a plan, but sadly they have now disbanded. So to safeguard Charnwood House for any further decay, we have done both essential roof and other works to maintain the structural integrity, in addition to clearance within the property, main electrical work, so the property is safe for viewing. So that's what has incurred the 30,000 I mentioned just now. We're undertaking a review of the work done to date and the reports on the building, and we'll be bringing forward options for the executive members to confirm next steps. While Charnwood House is not formally on the market at present, pending the outcome of this work, we're maintaining a list of organisations and groups who have expressed an interest, and they will be informed of next steps. And there's certainly one or two local groups within in Hitchin who I think are potential prime candidates, and certainly have expressed a strong interest in potentially taking on the building. And when I say market, this is about marketing as a community hub, and I think I want to be absolutely clear about that, because as I say, I know that there's always a danger that people use that when the people use the word market, it's about flogging it off and so on. No, this is about ensuring that Charnwood House is there for the long-term future of our community, and and getting that right is what's really really important. And it is really, if it was to go to another organization, we would want, and obviously any lease would obviously be very much part of maintaining it as a large part of it as a community hub. The council's got a website for the property, at Charlwood House. You can look at that, and that is periodically updated. I've been doing regular reports to certainly the Hitchin forum and the Hitchin area forum, community forum around the issue of Charlwood, and no doubt I'll probably be doing another one next week at the next community forum, very much probably based on some of the things I've said this evening. But to say that our sort of estates team will be coming to us with some options for next steps. And as I say, I think the importance there of that, what we've always seen is that money that we put aside, we absolutely knew, and that this was never going to be enough in and of itself to fund the full renovation of the building. What we very much saw it as, it would be an opportunity for someone else, other organisations who who are able to make grant bids in places where councils can't, and this money would be seen as if you like, a seed fund, a contribution towards that, so they can show to any potential funder, whether it's a lottery or wherever else it might be, that the council is supportive of a program and the project, and I've put money set aside, and I was very much keen that we obviously maintain that fund, and it sits within our budgets now. Clearly, we're coming up to another budget meeting, but from my own view, that we would very much want to keep that money there, and in order that we've got that as our contribution towards the of doing something in Charlwood. I entirely get that there may be, and I'm certainly happy to talk with officers where there is a need for another, if there's anything else further that we can put on the website around this, and I'll certainly take that away, David, as a point. And I know it's an issue, and that it's something that both in the past, when Keith was the executive member, and I know our current executive member Tamsin are really keen that we try and make some progress on this. But I'd say hopefully that gives you a flavour of where we are. But hopefully to expect some further reports in the near future, in order that we can then take those next steps as part of that program. But again, we want to try and come to some decisions on this for all the reasons we just talked about in the previous discussion around Churchgate, because LGR and other things beckon, and we want to try and get on with this as soon as we reasonably and feasibly can.
Thank you, Councillor Albert. Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Chair. As far as I can tell, Charlwood House isn't in the IdeaGen as a project or as a risk. So I'm just wondering whether you can clarify why that is, or whether, if I'm mistaken, maybe you can correct me.
No, it's not on our council delivery plan at the moment. I think it was one of those ones where we decided that until we have a defined plan for it, and obviously in that kind of stage of forming a plan, it stays off the council delivery plan to get to that point, and then we consider it at that point.
But it doesn't appear as a risk either. Is it not a risk in itself?
I mean, there are risks in the project, there are risks of all projects, but I'll talk to Sarah about whether they want to add it as a service risk, and then we can then consider it.
Thank you. And thank you so much, officers and members, for those discussions and answers. We'll return back to the recommendations then if we have no further questions. And I'll read them again, just so we remember what we're talking about. 2.1, provide comment on the Council Delivery Plan Q1 monitoring report, including the recommendation to be made to Cabinet, i.e. that Cabinet note progress against Council projects and performance indicators as set out in the Council Delivery Plan Appendix A, and approves new milestones and changes to milestones. And then 2.2, determine any project they want to receive more detail on as part of the next monitoring report. Can I get we have those have been proposed and seconded by Councillor Claydon and Councillor Billings. So we can move to the debate if anyone has anything further to add to the discussion. Seems not, which means I think we can move to a vote.
That motion is carried, Chair.
Thank you. In terms of determining the projects that we want to receive more detail on, we have discussed some of those in part of the conversation, and we can add that to the work programme and discuss that later offline as well. Okay, so let's move to point number 10 about pay on exit parking, and we have Councillor Donna Wright to present a report for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the report that the committee has received is to update them on the pay on exit parking project and to provide a comparison between 2025-26 Q1 and 2024-25 Q1 parking transaction figures and the number of penalty charge notices issued per car park. So just to summarise the key developments so far with the project, so the council commissioned Flowbird UK now arrive in mid-2024 to replace the parking machines across all its car parks. So the new machines were installed that are touchscreen, ticketless, contactless enabled, and with a check-in, check-out system that allows users to pay for actual time parked. Signage was provided to inform people how to pay, and reminder signs were also installed. One of the new machines within each car park, with the exception of Woodside in Hitchin, provides a cash payment option, and receipts are also available on request. The rollout of the new machines was completed across town centre car parks by mid to end of March, except for the Norton Common and the Hitchin Swim Centre, which were delayed due to traffic regulation orders. And the revised TRO for Norton Common has actually recently been completed and came into force from mid-July. There was a communication strategy to support the changeover to the new machines, which included member briefings, press releases, website FAQs, and social media engagements have also been used extensively by the comms team to address public concerns. Support has also been provided by the civil enforcement officers in the car parks themselves and a council helpline. So inevitably, there has been some teething problems with the new system, as you would expect from any new technology. Firstly, there has been some technical problems, network connections, so namely signal dropouts fleetingly, which has caused payment delays and resulted in some penalty charge notices being issued. There's also been visibility issues of the touchscreens in sunlight. So actual or planned fixes for these issues include installing industrial SIM cards, modems to address the connectivity issues, resolving some of the software issues, signage changes, and also consideration of zoning adjacent car parks for alternative payment options, and finally ensuring screens are cleaned regularly for visibility. There's also been some user confusion between prepay and post-pay, blue badge and season ticket holders requirements, etc., i.e. these people don't need to register for a parking session. So signage updates are underway to address this issue. You will have seen from the data provided in the paper that the number of PCNs issued has gone up in the Q1 period. It's gone up by 61% overall. This is partly due to people neglecting to put in their vehicle registration number correctly in the new machines, but also from February 2025, we have had a full team of CEOs with 2 extra officers, and so they have been able to provide more coverage around our car parks. The number of challenges to PCNs has also increased from 32% to 44%. Of these, 78% were cancelled versus 66% last year, as a more lenient approach has been taken in the rollout phase. So I think to conclude, despite the teething problems, and obviously the situation in Royston has been a bit more complex, the new system has definitely modernised our council car parks and increased convenience and flexibility for users. Businesses wanted this system, and to a great extent, it is North Herts catching up with how other places are managing their car parking. So it's good for business and fair to users. Inevitably, early technical issues and customer confusion has led to higher PCNs and complaints, but corrective actions and public adaptation are reducing these problems. The current data trend is showing that errors are reducing as the public adapts. So the number of PCNs being issued since April to July 2025 has reduced by 26% over the last 4 months. So people are getting used to the form of payment and making less errors when entering their VRM number. And this should result in less challenges being made going forwards. We also have to bear in mind that the vast majority of users have successfully continued to pay for parking following the changes. The total number of PCNs issued in our car parks is no more than 1% of the total number of successful parking transactions made over the same period. It's also worth noting that transaction volumes are rising. They've been up 6% overall, 18% in Baldock and Royston, and 13% in Letchworth. So more motorists are now using our town centres. There may be different reasons for this, but the new system has clearly not put people off, and it does offer people more flexibility to wander around the towns without worrying about getting back to their cars by a certain time, or having to worry about putting tickets in the windscreen that can get blown away by the wind. And that has happened to me. So all in all, I would say the new system has been a beneficial development, and we are working through the teething problems.
Thank you. So questions, Councillor Munster.
Thank you, Chair. And my own experience of this is only in Hitchin and Nebworth. So colleagues will have to sort of, forgive me for not sort of understanding how the rollout has gone elsewhere across the district. But certainly, in the last few months since we've seen this rollout, it has created an awful lot of confusion amongst local residents. We've seen an awful lot of large queues forming, at these parking machines. So I do have 2 questions. Obviously, this is very much a learning experience. It's very welcome that this technology is implemented, but also it's crucial that we are listening to our residents and we are taking on board their concerns and we are taking action on that. So obviously, we're looking at internal process, and we've made changes with respect to that. But for a resident who is parking in one of our car parks, what is the most visual demonstration that this council is listening to them and is trying to make the whole process of parking in Hitchin, Nebworth, Letchworth, Baldock, Royston as easy and as accessible as possible? What changes have we seen since the introduction of these machines?
Well, there's been a lot of work done on providing adequate signage and information boards alongside the machines. There's been published guidance on the website. The civil enforcement officers were present in the car parks for the first 2 weeks of the rollout to help people buy the machines. There's also FAQs that have been published more recently on the website. So, we've tried to provide as much guidance as we can. It's always difficult. You don't want information overload because people can disengage. And I think the trend is showing by the reduction in the number of PCNs that people are getting used to them. So yeah, it's a case of continuing, I think, with that strategy. I don't know if Nigel or Louise want to add anything to that.
Yes, you have a follow-up.
Thank you. Now, of course, a margin of user error is to be expected when, we're rolling out a new scheme as people get used to it, and their understanding grows. And obviously those steps are very much welcomed. But in terms of the technology itself, with machines searching for network connections, and there's being delays with respect to the machine connecting to sort of the handset that our CEOs have. Why wasn't that identified prior to rollout, and how quickly were those issues rectified once they were flagged?
I think I might ask Louise to answer this if she wouldn't mind, because I wasn't around for the initial rollout. Thank you.
That's fine. Thank you, Councillor. At the start of the consultants, the contractors that we undertook, they undertook signal tests of each of the car parks. So they would have monitored the signal strength, the network connections. As part of the project, we were informed that these machines would have what they call roaming SIMs, so they'd be able to roam and connect into whatever the network was at the time. So until we actually rolled out the machines and started to experience some of these connections, the main area is Hitchin, and Hitchin is well known as being an area where the connections are quite weak compared to other parts in the district. And the contractors have been working quite hard on this and looking at various ways to resolve the technology solutions. So we've, as Councillor Wright has said, we've looked at putting in additional SIM cards, antenna, and at the moment they're also looking at seeing as there's a way of getting in an independent company to look at the signal strength to see if that's another way of trying to resolve the issue. These are all being tested and monitored at the moment. The main areas of concern or weakness, let's say, are the Portmore Lane car parks. The rest of the Hitchin car parks seem to be working reasonably well. We have locked the machines onto a particular network. So in Hitchin, for example, we know that the O2 and the EE network are the stronger signals. So we have actually locked the machines onto those, which has actually helped their performance. So it's one of these things where, unfortunately, it's trying to deal with the network as best we can, but we're in the hands of the network providers and the strength of the signal. One of the other issues that we are looking at is perhaps maybe what we might need to do is possibly relocate the location of the machines. We're in the Portmore Lane car parks, they are actually up against sort of walls at the moment, and perhaps by relocating the machines to somewhere else within the car park might help the signal. I mean, we know that people who pay by phone, they're not necessarily at the machine when they're doing the pay by phone. They'll actually do it perhaps walking somewhere around the car park where they're actually putting up their phones to get a better signal. So it's a recognised issue, and as I say, we're trying to address it.
One more question before I, if that's all right, Chair, before I yield to other colleagues. But in terms of, you're talking there, Ms. Symes, about potentially relocating machines, and that sends alarm bells ringing in my head as to the costs of which could potentially be incurred with that. Now, this project had an initial budget of £300,000, my understanding from the papers is, and as such, has this scheme, has this project been delivered on budget? And what are the potential liabilities for the future that could sort of be incurred through that budget?
The project is being delivered on budget, and the issue around the siting of the machines, that's obviously something for us to discuss with the contractor in terms of its location. So that is something to come. So in terms of who would incur that cost, there's something that obviously is down to us in negotiating with the contractor, because in terms of how the project was obviously, they undertook the signal tests. We were informed that the machines would perform. The fact that unfortunately, there is some issues around the machines. So that would be something that we would negotiate with the contractor at the time, if that was required.
Thank you. Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Chair. I do have 3 questions, but I don't want to monopolise, so maybe I'll ask one and then I'll come back to the others later. That wasn't a bar. It wasn't a dig at you, Councillor Munson. So my first one actually follows on directly from Councillor Munson's question. So I understand that there have been some efforts recently over the last week or so to try and to install these new SIMs in machines in the Port Mill car parks in Hitchin, and that's in turn caused some new connectivity issues. So I just wondered whether you could clarify what that issue was and what the current status is and whether it's been resolved.
I'll try my best. I'm not high on technology, but I'll certainly try. What we, in terms of the contractors, trying different solutions and options to try and improve the signal strength. First of all, we introduced industrial SIM cards, which was a much stronger SIM, and that would pick up the signal, and that we've put that across all of our machines. So that's actually worked really well across most of the car parks. As I said, except for the Portmore Lane car parks, where things are a little bit more, where the signal's weaker. What they did is they tried to fit a modem and a router into those Portmore lanes, which they did last week, to see if that would help strengthen the signal, but it actually caused more concerns, where what was happening was in some of the people were being able to, what was happening is it was losing its connection quite frequently. And because we are using check in, check out, it means that it's happening more in real time, because people are actually making more transactions in real time, which is what's causing the machines to actually look for networks. So they're working harder, so to speak, to look for the network. So so that was causing us a bit of concern. So what we've done is we switched them off those modems and gone back to the SIMs, because at least the machines were working, although they might have been falling out. So that was a situation, that was a possible solution, but it was not as efficient as they had hoped it would work. As I said, what they're now looking at is installing antennas, if they can, into the machines to see if that's a way of helping to pick up signal. They're testing that at the moment, and we'll be advised of the outcome of that test towards the end of the week, hopefully. And as I said earlier, what they're also doing is looking at getting in an independent sort of network company to actually come and do an independent assessment, and then to come up and maybe offer us something that they might be overlooking as part of the solution. So they are trying their different routes. We have asked them, we have said to them that if these don't work, we expect a plan B. And we've been asking them to prepare for a plan B to inform us how we can actually rectify this. So we are working hard. We are trying to find a solution for those two car parks.
Can I follow up on that point, Chair? How experienced is the contractor in installing these kinds of machines? It seems surprising to me that this issue wouldn't have arisen in other places. I'm sure there are other relative dead spots in other parts of the country. This can't be something that's unique to Hitchin. So it seems surprising that they would be ambushed by this to the extent that they're trying solutions that don't work and continuing to try things with no guarantee that it actually sorts it out.
They are a reputable company. They've been around for many years, Flowbird. We had them originally. They installed our previous machines. As I said, I think it's this new check in, check out functionality, which is new for Flowbird. They have rolled it out with other customers and clients and local authorities. And I don't think we're necessarily unique. I think they are generally trying to understand the issue in Hitchin. And I don't know whether they've had similar issues. One would hope that if they have had similar issues, that's why I think they're trying these different solutions. I can't answer the question about other authorities.
Thank you. Councillor Bartwas.
Thank you. I've got quite a lot of questions. I'm just going to go for it. So in terms of the car parks that are referred to in Hitchin and Royston, how will people know about this possibility of zoning, and that if there's more than one machine nearby, they can pay at either machine? How will people know? Number two, how much is this additional signage and the changes to signage and I think you mentioned antenna as well, going to Costos. You mentioned the independent assessment. Was this something that could have been done sooner? And lastly, I think there's a lot of, whilst undoubtedly it isn't the case that it's most people having these issues, I do think you have to think about the disproportionate impact on certain people and their accessibility needs. So when it comes to difficulty reading the screens, that's just something that I think should be wholly unavoidable. You've got the issue further down about the confusion for blue badge holders as well. So how are we communicating with those that have those blue badges? And might there be people who've unfairly gained a PCN but don't know how to challenge that?
I will, sorry. Oops. I'll do my best to answer. I don't know if I've picked them all up. With regard to zoning, this is where it's something that we would obviously look at in terms of the car park. So car parks that are adjacent to, so for example, in the Bancroft car park in Hitchin, we have two machines, one that operates a smaller car park, one operates a larger car park. If one of the machines goes down, a note would come up on the machine that says to use an alternative machine in the car park. So the software, we can inform people through the software on the machine. When we say looking at zoning options, this is where, for example, looking at the Angel Pavement and Marketplace in Royston, there are two car parks they operate as two separate car parks, but they look like one car park. So if one machine goes down, loses its connection, for example, or is out of order, then either that machine, a note could be put up onto the machine software that would come up with saying to use an alternative machine, which would be the one in the opposite car park. And also, to be honest, our civil enforcement officers are pretty much on the ball in the sense that we will put notices up on machines to inform customers as well. In terms of signage, the signage is being budgeted for it as part of the overall project, the 300,000 budget project. We are, I haven't got the figures to date, but the signage is included in that, and that is being reviewed as part of the project. In terms of what the work that's been ongoing now in terms of the antenna, and that is something that we would be, as I said, that's something that we're obviously discussing with the contractor, as at this stage we're obviously expecting them to be looking at all of those solutions to come up with that for us, and that obviously would be part of a negotiation at some particular stage. But at the moment they're trying to, obviously they're looking at all of those options. Costs have not been entered into discussions at this point in time. With regard to informing various different sectors of the public, it's through signage. We've put up what we've done with regard to disabled blue badge holders. We've putting up signage near the location of the bays to actually say to people that they don't need to enter a parking session. It's on our, we've obviously got it on our website, and that's the best we can do really, is only through signage. We don't have any other ways of, and through social media bites if we're also asked as well. Anything else is there anything I've missed out?
No, I think that was pretty comprehensive.
Thank you. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this I've got a couple of questions. That's what everybody says at the start, isn't it? But I'll just do one for now. The more specific local one. Councillor Munser mentioned Nebworth, which is great. Please come and use the car park. Just so councillors are aware, the new system's been implemented, and then recently on top of that, there's a change to the tariffs implemented to give people the first 30 minutes free for the users, although that is essentially the parish councils agreed to subsidise that, which is great and something, as the parish council regularly remind me, they've been asking for decades, I believe is the quote. But it's good that it's been happening. I think there's been some teething issues around the machines like we talked about, but they are being worked through, and signage and things like that, particularly around the way the machines work with the free 30 minutes part. However, the one thing that's outstanding that they've asked me to flag up to the officers is getting the agreement in place between the district council and the parish council on how the subsidy is working for the free 30 minutes. I think that the parish council and clerk are just concerned there's a bit of an unmanaged risk around the arrangements on that. Obviously, it's beneficial for us because we'll get the subsidy back from it. But if you could please find a way just to work with the parish council clerk to get that agreed and in place, given the scheme's live, that would be good to expedite that if you can.
Yeah, we're aware that's an outstanding issue, and we're happy to take that away, and we're working with colleagues in legal to try and expedite that as soon as possible.
Thank you. And Councillor Prescott then.
I feel like almost a fraud because I've only got one question. Also, there aren't any paid parking areas in my ward. And as a councillor on council business, I don't pay anyway. So possibly I should be declaring a prejudicial interest. But my question is about and accepting that the number of PCNs that issued are a tiny percentage of the total number of tickets that get taken. It does seem that at 78%, an enormous percentage of them are being cancelled. Is that all down to the tremendous generosity of the council, or is that because a good proportion of them should never have been issued in the first place? There was only one question. If you're waiting for more, there isn't any more.
Yeah, no, I think we were just checking who was going to take that one. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you would expect an increase in penalty charge notices when new processes are being introduced. We anticipated there would be an increase. However, I think we didn't anticipate how many people would enter their vehicle registration numbers incorrectly, which obviously has increased the number of challenges and placed more pressure on our back office team. I think things are improving as people are getting more familiar with the system. I think the other important issue is also the increase in CEOs, which has led to more coverage over the car park, which is a good thing because it means our enforcement processes are robust. And I'm glad that you commented about the fact that the high number, the increased number of PCNs is only a fraction of the number of successful transactions that have been made. So I don't know if Louise, you want to add anything more to that?
Just one quick point in that government guidance around it is that essentially the exercise of discretion should sit with the back office rather than with the CEOs. So there's a kind of a professional obligation on CEOs to enforce the rules on a fair and consistent basis, effectively in line with the rules. So obviously we've been operating on that basis with some give, particularly around sort of minor VRM indiscretions. But yeah, on the main, the CEOs have an obligation to enforce the infraction, however minor it may be perceived to be, and it is for the appeals system to sort of judge the merits of the appeal rather than for the CEOs to make on-the-spot decisions. And being consistent, as I say, that's government guidance and kind of Secretary of State's approach.
I could just come back on that, just 2 seconds. Thank you, Nigel, for actually answering the question, which wasn't to do with the number that are getting issued. It was the number that are being cancelled, which is the point. But I notice, and I appreciate what you're saying, but I notice it has increased in the current period that we're looking at. But even in the previous period, 2/3 of the tickets were getting cancelled anyway, which was presumably before the regime of immense generosity on our part. And again, I ask the question, if the officers are issuing tickets that in a good proportion of cases are getting cancelled or rescinded, is there a training issue there? Because I appreciate entirely what you're saying, it's not up to them to exercise discretion. But one wonders if I don't believe that all of the 66% last year or 78% this year are all down to the generosity of the council. I mean, maybe they are, but that would be a surprise.
I think that's probably a point for us to take away and look at in a bit more detail. It's not something I can answer on the spot. I should also just sort of point out operationally, just the consideration of challenges actually sits in the customer's directorate and therefore on sort of the customer's exec portfolio. So I've got to be a bit careful about straying too far into speaking on their behalf when, well, Val is present here, but I don't think she's prepped to answer questions on this particular matter.
Thank you. Councillor Clayton.
Thank you.
Number 2 of 3, yeah?
Yeah, I might try and roll it all together. But just quick comment first. Yes, I accept that the PCN numbers are a small fraction of the number of visits, but not every infringing case actually gets a PCN, presumably. So there is it's not a case that every possible PCN that could be issued is being issued, right? So the numbers could, in principle, be higher if you had more CEOs. Anyway, that's not my question. My question is about the point that Councillor Wright and the report make that people are, a large part of the problem is people mis-entering their VRM or their registration plate number to the rest of us. So how do we know that that's the case? How do we know they're putting it in wrongly? Are they effectively paying to park cars that don't exist? How often are they double paying for the same car? And what happens if, let's say, they put the number in correctly when they check in, but they put it in wrongly when they check out, so the session never ends? So I'm just sort of trying to understand how all of this works out and how we can actually see what's going on. How do we know what people are doing wrong? And my other quick question, which I'll just tuck in at the end, is Table 3 implies that 79 PCN challenges were not responded to. Why is that? Thank you.
So, I mean, how the system works is that the CEOs check the actual vehicle on site with what's registered on the handheld machine. So that obviously the two have to match. So if the BRN isn't showing on the handheld, a PCN will be issued. There will always be an element of human error. And the council has taken a more, as we've said, a more lenient approach across the rollout and rescinded the PCN where there's been cases of clearly people misinputting their VRN. I mean, in theory, probably someone could register to park a non-existent vehicle if they get their VRN very wrong. But I think that's how these digital systems tend to operate. I think pay by phone methods might allow some cross-checking with the DVLA, but I don't think there's automatic cross-checking for every registration. I think checking every entry with the DVLA would really slow the system down and probably add costs and possibly raise privacy issues. So I don't think it's technically possible. So yes, there may be cases. I'll have to check with Louise. I don't think we particularly, whether we've picked up or whether we've got the data to support that. Yeah, sorry, what was the second question? I've forgotten.
I suppose I did ask too many questions at once, sorry. The very last question was about the challenges that were not responded to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really a case of the fact that the data is really a snapshot in time. If we rerun the figures today, we might expect that figure to reduce as some of those 79 challenges may have been reviewed. So, people have 28 days to challenge a PCN after it's been served. So there is always a time lag as to when the PCN challenges are reviewed and appropriate actions followed.
Okay, so we just haven't got to them yet, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if it's been issued, if a PCN has been issued at the end of June, while they might have been recorded in the June figure for PCNs issued, they may not have been challenged. So it's really a time lag, and the fact that the data is, as I say, a snapshot in time at that point.
Yeah.
But it's not that they're not being responded to.
But so just, sorry, going back to the first part a bit about people entering their registration numbers wrong. You say if there's a car in the car park that hasn't been registered, then that's because they put it in wrong. It could be because they haven't put anything in at all, but they've
Well, it'd
not
get
even
PCN
tried.
notice.
Yes, but how do you distinguish one case from the other? Are you actually do you actually match registration numbers that are close to ones that are in the car park in order to find, oh, well, they put an M instead of an N, therefore that's why they've run, what I'm trying to ask is, how do
Understanding
we
is
know
in this initial phase, I think there is, and again, I'll refer to Louise, but I think we are, when there's clearly a minor error, so it might be an L, an M rather than an N, or a 0 rather than an O. I think where that's clear, we are taking more of a lenient approach. In this,
I just don't understand how we ascertain that that's what's happened. But
yeah, sorry.
In terms of when people are, obviously when a customer is issued with a PCN, they have the right to challenge. So it's through the challenge process. And quite rightly, somebody might have entered the VRN number incorrectly and they received a PCN. So obviously they're concerned, well, I've made my payment, why have I been issued with a PCN? So they will obviously register their challenge. So that then goes to the back office system. On the back office system, we are able to it's recorded. Every payment and transaction that is made is on the back office system. And that is against a VRN number, which gets entered. So as long as the customer can identify the car park that they were probably in at the time, and when they made their payment, and possibly if they've got a receipt as well that they can demonstrate that, then the back office system can look through that system and identify the VRN number. Now, that's where Councillor Wright's saying sometimes it's quite easy to identify because it's somebody has transposed numbers, and they're very close together. So we're able to obviously to pick those out. If somebody has made quite a significant error, like they've put in their wife's car or their husband's car, which is completely different, the only other way of tracking that is through the payment card. So if they gave the last few digits of their card number, then we would be able to track it back that way as well. So the system allows us to look that up. It is very time consuming, and that is why, we've obviously got quite a bit of a backlog on this, because it's quite time consuming in terms of our back office team looking through all of these. So the system allows us to do that cross-checking.
Thank you. I'm going to pick up a question on behalf of a councillor from Royston regarding 8.11, which references Royston in the report. It's a question in 4 parts. How will the voucher system operate? The rationale for insisting on sessions being checked in after 3 was to gather data to inform a decision on the subsidy. Do we have, how is the data looking so far? And how much faith is there in the data being collected? And will further work be needed to arrive at a settlement for next year? And when will that decision on next year's subsidy be taken? Thank you.
Okay, so in answer to the first question, how will the voucher system operate? Well, this will be by way of people being asked to take a ticket from the machine after registering their free parking session and displaying the ticket in their windscreen. The second question about the rationale for insisting on sessions being checked in, is that right, after 3, was to gather data to inform a decision on the subsidy, and how is the data looking so far? It is important for the council to have a robust baseline to understand and monitor usage figures in its car parks, and particularly for the after 3 p.m. session in Royston, which will then obviously assist with the third-party subsidy discussions. So we've taken a snapshot figure for August, which is just over 3,000 transactions have been voluntarily registered for the free after 3 p.m. scheme in Royston. What we don't have is a figure for is any of the numbers of unregistered sessions, as currently we're not issuing PCNs for failure to comply with this request. How much faith is there in the data being collected? Well, collecting the most accurate data is through people registering their free parking session and requiring people to display a ticket and that will enable the most effective management of enforcement to take place. So this should eliminate the requirement for further survey work. But if that needs to happen, then that needs to happen. But at the moment, we're hoping to collect the data through the registration and display ticket system. When will a decision on next year be taken? Well, this will be part of the tariff review for 26-27 and cabinet approval in early 2026. Work will commence on this review in late autumn, and this will include discussions with the Royston bid and the Royston Town Council, and to ascertain as to whether they wish to continue the subsidy or not.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. My other question, which was from earlier, which is fine, but it's a macro question, really. I think, Councillor Wright, you mentioned earlier on the obviously the system is bringing us into the modern world, or maybe halfway into the modern world. Clearly, a lot of some council car parks and private car parks use CCTV systems with number plate recognition to put in partially or fully automated solutions for billing for parking. I can see, that could have advantages in terms of both an easier customer experience, more accurate billing and PCNs, as well as the potential for cost savings on the CEOs. But then there's other concerns like privacy, etc. So I guess this may be before my time, but has there been a sort of in principle appetite decision from the council around not doing that intentionally, which is why we've got the current system, and also could the current system we've just put in, is it possible to enhance and upgrade it to support an add-on like something like the CCTV based monitoring?
Yeah, I'll ask Louise or Nigel to take this, because it was before my time as well when this decision was taken.
Yes, we go back a couple of years now where we were asked to investigate various options for pay on exit parking. And the ANPR system was investigated and looked at. We had consultants that looked at it independently for us, and our car parks was quite small because we have quite a few car parks, but they're small car parks. So the cost of putting in an ANPR system was actually quite expensive for the council, given the size of our car parks. You really want to have larger car parks. So something like our multi-storey car parks, where we have 200 plus or more spaces, actually makes it more cost effective. So those issues were looked at. And then we decided looking at other options. And this option of this check in, check out system was one that we found out that was being used in other local authorities. So that was an option that we thought would be worth pursuing. So obviously, as part of our tender submission, we then went out and said, looked at the various payment options that we were looking for. So the check in, check out system is a way of addressing that, of allowing people to stay a bit longer. And yes, we could add on an ANPR system onto the current system, but it would be at quite a high cost to the council, again because of the size of our car parks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clayton.
Thank you. This is very quick, I promise. With regard to visibility of the screens and people being able to see them in bright sunlight, might a solution be to put a kind of hood over the screen attached to the machine so that it was shaded?
Thank you for the suggestion. We will take it away and speak to our contractors about that.
Thank you. So I'm going to, once again, I'm going to sort of pull back and ask one last question. We've heard a little bit about confusion about the methodology, confusion about how to actually enter your number plates and voucher systems and all sorts of other things. The report does mention FAQs being available. Were these actually available during the rollout? Because the Internet Archive apparently suggests that these weren't published until May. Is it correct that at the time the machines were being rolled out, the only information provided to the public was that press release? And do we think perhaps, therefore, more could have been done in hindsight to better manage this change?
Okay. Thanks, Chair. The strategy in March was to concentrate on providing adequate signage and information boards alongside the machines and publishing guidance on the new machines. As stated in the report, the public were informed about the new machines via press releases and also through Outlook, both in advance of the new machines being installed and following their installations. The bid managers and the town centre, Royston Town Council, were also informed. We also posted how to use the machines on the website on the 18th of March once all the machines were installed. And as I mentioned earlier, the contractors and the civil enforcement officers were present in the car parks for 2 weeks following the installation of the machines, helping people to make payments. The FAQs came a bit later because I think by the very nature of FAQs is that they build up over time and then become FAQs. So, you know, we needed to understand the common issues and queries that people were raising post-installation. So that's why they weren't available right at the beginning. In terms of whether anything more could have been done in hindsight, I mean, I think there are always learning points with any change programme, and these will obviously have to be looked at for future endeavours. It may be that a slower, more phased rollout of the machines might have mitigated against some of these initial issues. But obviously there are disadvantages with this approach as it basically entails a longer period of a disruption. And in terms of costs, you can lose some of the economies of scale. But, you know, as I say, I think those learning points will be taken forward as they always will be with any project of this nature.
Thank you. Does anybody else have another question for this topic? Okay, thank you so much for the reports and answers today. Our recommendations are that 2.1, that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee notes the Quarter 1 update of the Pay on Exit parking project. Can I have a proposer? Thanks, Councillor Clayton. And a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Chalmers. Is there any debate on this item? No, thank you. Then we can move to a vote.
That motion is carried, Chair.
Thanks. Thank you again. We can now move to item 11, our presentation on local government reorganisation. And we have Councillor Laura Williams and Anthony Roche here to present to us.
Yeah, I think we've got some slides for this. So while we're getting them up, I'm not gonna talk much, but last night we had the opportunity to hear about all of the work that's going on, the work streams, the modelling, the assumptions. It's extensive, and many thanks to Anthony for that session and for answering all those questions. So tonight I think we want to focus a bit more on the process of how we're going to get to the proposal that we need to submit to government at the end of November. I'm going to skip on to 2 slides later. Yeah. Let's go to the next one. So a bit of a reminder, this is what it looks like currently. We've got these 11 authorities just now, 2 tiers. That's going to go to a number of unitaries, 1 tier, and we as NHC get to propose what we want that to look like for our area. The intention is that we will back a particular option that will go into a single Hearts-wide proposal that will detail one, but probably more than one option, depending on who in Hearts wants what. So next slide, please. So inviting unit proposals happened earlier on this year in the spring. We are currently in stage 2, and that will conclude in November this year. 3 to 5 are things that the government does, and then stage 6 will kick off in the middle of next year and complete on 1st of April 2028. So that's where we are just now, and I think what we want to talk tonight about is mainly about stage 2, but I'm going to hand over to Anthony.
Thank you. Thank you. Helps if I talk into the microphone. If we could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So what you can see on the screen there is the principles by which the 12 authorities in Hertfordshire have agreed to work together. I say 12 authorities, that's the County Council, the 10 district and boroughs, and also the Police and Crime Commissioner, who, whilst they aren't as actively involved, because clearly a lot around local government reorganisation is about the councils, the Police and Crime Commissioner certainly has a view around the strategic authority side of things, because elsewhere in the country, that office has been rolled up into the mayoral strategic authorities. So those are the agreed principles as to how we're going to work together, agreed by the leaders and chief executives of all the authorities. I think they're self-explanatory, so I won't talk further to them. If we could have the next slide, please. So start with a bit of a recap before then moving on to how we're working at the moment. So members will recall that when the government invitation came out at the beginning of the year to submit proposals by the 28th of November, they also asked that we submit what was described as an interim submission in the 3rd week of March. And that was described by government as a checking in point to see how we were working, how we were progressing, make sure that we were on track for ultimately delivering on the final submission. So this was how we organised ourselves for that first phase, where we had to move really very quickly, as you can see there, from the beginning of February through to submission. It was a 7-week process. So it was very focused. We had a white paper working group that we set up that was mainly involving the chief execs, reporting into the leaders, although there was a bit of work being done in the background by the finance leads, our Section 151 working group. So that looked at some initial options appraisals that then got developed into the outline proposal, and ultimately that final document submitted on the 21st of March. We were able to submit a single document on behalf of all of Hertfordshire. But at that stage, I think it's fair to say that there were probably 2 parallel areas of work going on. One set, district and boroughs plus the county council, and one set that was district and boroughs on their own, which was necessary at that stage to see where the district and boroughs were at in terms of developing common ground. But we learned from what worked and didn't work in that process. And in particular, one of the things we took away was actually we shouldn't be having 2 sets of work happening in parallel. It just needs to be a single set of work. So if we could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So this is the governance structure that we adopted post that March submission, and which is going to run through to the end of November and the submission of our Hertfordshire proposal. Post-November, and I will come to this a bit later in the presentation, we will have another opportunity to rethink whether we need a different structure to then take us into the transition phase. And spoiler alert, the answer to that is yes. So we have the Herts Leaders Group meeting fortnightly. We have the Chief Exec Coordinating Group meeting weekly. We have a Programme Management Office, which is project managers essentially making sure that the entire programme stays on track and that all of the different work streams are doing what they're supposed to be doing and feeding back the information they need to be feeding back to then be provided through chief execs to leaders. You can see there a series of different work streams in the dark blue boxes. So data and insight, finance, legal, democracy, governance, etc., etc. As you can see in the text at the bottom, we are represented by either a director or senior manager on every single one of those work streams. We also take the lead on a couple of them. So on the service design work stream, because of the sheer size of that, we have, I think it's 5, certainly 4, maybe 5 chief execs who are co-leads on that. I am one of them. And we've divided up the various different services between us as to who's leading on which bit, and then we're bringing it all together. Joe Dufficy, our Director of Customers, is leading the technology work stream on behalf of all of Hertfordshire. Additionally, as part of that program management office, we have a program board that sits there that has 3 chief exec representatives representing a Conservative-led district, a Labour-led district, and a Lib Dem-led district. I'm there on behalf of those districts that have Labour authorities. And there is also a representative from the county council. So we are very well represented across all of that structure and are in positions where we can try to influence the outcome for the good of Hertfordshire moving forward. If I could have the next slide, please. You'll note on the bottom axis, there isn't a timescale. I will talk to it instead because it is slightly a movable feast. So what we recognized was on that previous slide with the work streams, we set up a number of work streams, but actually they are essentially working to different deadlines. And this is what this slide is trying to show. So Horizon 1 is the development of that proposal by the 28th of November. So that is where we'd need to spend initially a lot of our effort. And you will see that that starts to tail off. That starts to tail off essentially at the end of October when the submission document is finalised and then goes through the democratic processes in November. Horizon 2 is the transition planning and getting the new unitaries set up for day 1, launch day on 1st of April 2028. We can't start that early enough, frankly. So that's why there was already a transition work stream. It is already working in the background. We had a chief exec away day last week where a large focus of the day was on talking about the transition and what we need to be thinking about now in order to make the next 2.5 years as smooth as possible. And again, I will come to that a bit more. So that will ramp up as the work on the submission drops off. The peak of that work is in advance of day 1. And then that will start to drop off once the authorities are launched, which on government's timescales, 1st of April 2028. And then Horizon 3, which is our vision and ambition, we want to set that now. And that will be within the submission document. But what we recognise is ultimately that is within the gift of the new unitary authorities and the new strategic authority when they're created. They will adopt their council plans. They will adopt their strategies and policies. But we want to at least have something in the submission to government to talk about where we think this could go. So that's why it starts fairly low, but the reason why that ramps up is once the new authorities have gone live and they're safe and legal and they're operating and they're delivering business as usual, they will obviously want to ramp up their ambition and their vision and what they want to achieve. So if I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. This is a really busy slide, so I'm not going to talk to it. What this is trying to illustrate is the sheer amount of work that is going on in the background across all of these different work streams. So the blue boxes are summaries of the activities that are going on. The purple kite shapes, diamonds, whatever you want to call them, those are decision points. So that's both for deliverables for the submission document, but also deliverables for the transition. And you will see that that is taking us up to the end of September. October is going to be, as you can see, is going to be drafting. Essentially, it's going to be taking the outputs that we get from the stakeholder engagement in September, working up the final version of the document in October for then submission in November. If I could have the next slide, please. So this is focusing on what I've just described, the activity for the next 3 months. So you can see the box there about the public and stakeholder engagement, the analysis that follows. We've put in some of the key dates there around party conferences because we recognise that will affect people's availability. And there is a significant amount of ongoing activity across the work streams to inform the submission document. Now, that's not all of the work streams have work going on, but they're going at different paces. So the ones that are key for the submission are finance and services. Some of the other ones are important, but no, they're not quite as critical for the submission document. Because as we discussed last night, the submission document, because of the stage we are at in terms of developing proposals, will necessarily be based on a series of assumptions that will then ultimately be worked through during the transition phase. You can, just to mention on the stakeholder engagement, as was mentioned, we had the councillor briefing last night. We have 3 staff conference sessions across the next 2 weeks or so. We have the area forums where either Daniel Allen or Laura will be present at each one to present to you, and the County Council will also be represented at each of those forums. And that's obviously an opportunity to engage with the public. And equally, there are all the online assets that are being promoted. Those assets are on behalf of all of Hertfordshire, and we are all directing residents, businesses, staff, councillors, whoever it may be, to the same website and the same feedback form, so that all of that is captured centrally in the same format, which then lends itself to analysis. Just on the decision making in December, the Hertfordshire authorities, obtained King's Council's advice that was very clear that it was an executive decision to indicate which proposed model was our preference. But what we recognised, both the leader, myself, and we strongly made the point in the Herts Leaders Group's meetings, was we recognised the importance of wanting to give all members the opportunity to have a debate about this issue, because we recognise the importance to it. And therefore, we've scheduled a council meeting to discuss the cabinet paper. But to clarify, council will not be making any decisions. That will be the remit of cabinet. So that special full council meeting will be on the 13th of November. It will be a single item meeting, and then the cabinet that will make the decision will be on the 19th of November. We have brought forward the scheduled cabinet meeting from the following week, so there will be other business on that agenda, but obviously I would say this would probably be the most important item on that. We are looking to have a consistent report across all 11 councils, and certainly they will have the same recommendations. We are currently considering what those will be. The very clear guidance from MHCLG and ministers is that each council can only choose one option as their preference. Of course, it is possible that a council could choose not to express a preference, and we will see what transpires across the 11 authorities. If I could have the next slide, please. This is just there to illustrate the potential structure of the submission document. It is a live document. We are still working on it. It's possible that the options for the 2, 3, and 4 may sit as appendices to the main spine of the document, or we may embed them within as it's presented there. That's an ongoing discussion. We're keeping it under review as we draft it. Those are just providing some very broad headings as the sorts of things we are going to cover. There is going to be a lot more in it, and there will be a lot of detail that sits behind it as well. So if I could have the next slide, please. So looking at the process and the steps as to what comes next, it's important to be really clear that the councils are not deciding the outcome. The Secretary of State will be. So as you can see on the slide, MHCLG wrote to all councils going through reorganisation on the 24th of July, and the timescale set out on this slide come from that letter. You will see that the language is relatively vague and doesn't provide specific dates. We are, as part of our regular meetings with the chief executives, we are engaging with MHCLG civil servants. And one of the things that we have put on the agenda to discuss with them tomorrow is, can we please have more specific dates than what has been provided so far? So as this evolves, we will let you know. So after submission, the government will decide on which option or options it will put forward to statutory consultation. In Surrey, that statutory consultation lasted for 7 weeks. I would assume that a similar length of consultation will take place in the other reorganisation areas. As you can see, it could be launched in the new year and would likely close after the local elections in May. Worth noting at this point, in May 2026, a number of the district and boroughs have got elections. If there are changes of administration as a result, we will just have to work with it. Obviously, the submission document will already have gone in, but it may change how that council engages with government during the consultation phase. We will see. The government then makes the decision on which proposal to implement. And as you can see, the language used was could be announced before the summer recess 2026. So that is roughly the end of July 2026. Now, if we touch on the transition side of things, if we wait until the end of July 2026 before we start working on the transition, we leave ourselves very short from that point through to the 1st of April 2028 and the go live date. So what we are already discussing and will ramp up from November and December is what work on the transition can we be doing now that is blind to the outcome that the government decide on. What we recognise is it's really important that post that November submission, we don't rest on our laurels and lose momentum and time, because the timescales from decision point to go live are really, really tight. So next bullet on there is the secondary legislation to be laid in the House after the summer recess 2026. So what is meant by secondary legislation? That is the structural changes order. So that is the legislation that government lays in Parliament that will create the new authorities, will set their boundaries, set the number of councillors, the electoral cycle, other key information like that. And that is the piece of legislation that will also start to introduce the restrictions that will be placed on the predecessor authorities like North Herts that we were discussing earlier in the agenda tonight. The elections to the shadow unitary authorities will be on the 6th of May 2027, based on the current government timeline. What do the shadow authorities then have the power to do? They will start making decisions on all of the things that need to be in place so that they can go live and operate on the 1st of April. So it will be things like adopting a constitution, appointing their chief exec, head of paid service, and the other statutory officers, adopting financial regulations, a budget, etc., etc., etc. So all of those basic building blocks that we take for granted because we've been doing them for 50 years, the shadow authorities adopt those during that period between their election and then the go live date in 11 months' time. So what is the requirement for go live? The test is that those new authorities need to be safe and legal. That's the minimum requirement. There is an ongoing conversation amongst chief execs that we will also then engage the leaders about, which is what could safe and legal plus look like, i.e. how much transformation, how much of that ambition, how much of that vision that we've been talking about can we deliver upfront and as part of the transition program, rather than simply lifting and shifting all existing operations and then sorting it out afterwards. So there could be benefits from that approach around better services for customers earlier, or potentially savings being found sooner. But obviously we need to carefully balance the risk with the opportunities, because there will be some things, social care being an obvious example, where you will probably want to take a pretty low risk approach, because ultimately you don't want to put any individuals or families that are already in difficult circumstances at risk by doing something too soon before you're ready. So next slide is just a series of question marks, which indicates the end of the processy bit that we were asked to present on. More than happy to field questions. So back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you. The questions coming in already. Councillor Munster, would you like to kick off?
Thank you. Well, it's not necessarily a question for our chief executive, but more a question for the most senior elected politician in this room, which is Councillor Bryant. And I know you're obviously not necessarily speaking to this item, but we've heard from our chief executive that the votes of which council will take in November are very much indicative, and it will be a decision of which cabinet will take as an executive decision. And therefore, can I have an assurance that the decision of which is taken by council with respect to the recommendation will be one of which is followed through by cabinet?
I don't think I'm in a position to do that at this point. It's something that we've got to discuss in cabinet as to how we'll do this process, and certainly it's not something we've discussed yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ward.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just thinking, obviously we had our briefing last night. Thank you for the time on that. Mainly, I was reflecting on not what's going on with the process, but the impact of this on everything else. Clearly, very detailed slides on many boxes, lots of engagement and involvement, which is potentially good for influencing the future. But clearly this is having an impact in terms of your time, the director's time, senior manager's time, all being consumed. How, I guess, how are you working with the your leadership team and also the cabinet to make sure that we understand and we're monitoring the impact all that diversion is having on our services day to day to customers?
Thank you. Really good question. And I'm grateful that you've acknowledged that issue, because it's absolutely a live issue. We are currently having to juggle and balance the work that we're all contributing to this programme, delivering on business as usual. And we also need to recognise that if North Herts has less than 3 years of its existence left, there will be things that the administration wants to achieve within that time period before we are no longer North Herts. And so in some respects, the level of ambition and desire may well increase. And how we balance those three things is a matter of an ongoing conversation between officers and their executives. And hopefully the service plans that we agree between us and the budget bids that will be developed for later in the year will reflect those pressures. But I think it's also worth acknowledging that as well as those pressures, this creates a huge amount of uncertainty for staff in terms of not knowing what the future might bring. Now, given the average age profile of staff in general across local authority, it could well be that some see this as an opportunity to retire and step away. But equally, there are lots like me who have young family, mortgage, want a job on the other side of this. And that uncertainty can be very unsettling. And that's a conversation that is ongoing internally, but is also being recognised amongst the other Hertfordshire authorities. And we will be reviewing our workforce strategy, and we've literally got a session on Thursday morning with the leadership team and our HR manager looking at our workforce strategy and what do we need to do for the next 3 years for our workforce, both in terms of delivering for North Herts, but also supporting those individuals during that period of uncertainty, and also putting everyone in the best possible position to have a good job on the other side of this, whatever their desires may be, because that might be wanting to work for the new local authority, or it might be wanting to do something else entirely and taking it as an opportunity. So I think we absolutely have to recognise all of those impacts, and I'm grateful that you did. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clayton.
Thank you. A couple of questions, both of which are hopefully reasonably straightforward. Firstly, with regards to the centralised consultation process and the survey that's online, who's handling the data that comes out of that, and will we have sight of it when we see this at council? And the second question is, how much detail is required ultimately in this preferred option that the council submits? Do we have to say how many authorities? Do we have to give boundaries? Do we have to give anything additional to that? So how much needs to be in that submission finally? Thank you.
Thank you. So starting with the consultation, we have got consultants supporting the work stream, so they will be doing the analysis and providing that to us. My understanding is all of that raw data is going to be made available to all of the authorities, and you should be able to sort it so that you know what the feedback, for example, for North Herts has been, so that we will get the overall, but we will also be able to reflect whether there is a difference of opinion in different localities. In terms of, is that going to be available? Yes, it will be available. Will it be part of the council report? Frankly, I don't know if it will be appended to it or appended to the final submission document, or whether it will be made available by way of background document. So to be determined, but I'll raise it as a query that's come up, and then we'll agree an approach, because we want all the councils to be consistent in terms of how we're handling that. In terms of the submission document, government does not prescribe what that looks like. So if any members are interested, there are other submission documents available online. So for example, Surrey submitted, there were two completely separate documents submitted. I believe one was on behalf of the county council and one of the districts, and the other was on behalf of the remaining district and boroughs. And they took a completely different approach with their submission documents. And there are other ones available from previous rounds of LGR as well. So up to us how we want to shape it, the way we've chosen to do it, because we are still working well together and have a joint ambition of a single submission document, is we will have a document that contains a spine of information that is common to all of the proposals. And then we will have sitting underneath that specific mini proposals for what looks like it's going to be a 2 unitary option, a 3 unitary option, and a 4 unitary option. Again, government doesn't prescribe what needs to be in those, but clearly those wanting to support any of the options would want a sufficiently persuasive case put forward within that document, because that's your, for want of a better expression, sales pitch to government as to why that's the right option. So hopefully we will put forward a document that has 3 really compelling cases in it. Each council will make a decision as to which of those 3 is its preference, and then we will capture that, and probably either within a covering letter or with an executive summary, we will say this option is supported by the following councils, this one by these, and this one by these. And then if anyone doesn't express a preference, we'll capture that somehow. So that's how it will be reflected. We are engaging with the communications professionals and graphic designers that we have within the authorities to try to ensure that the document, as well as being persuasive, also looks good as well, and is reflective of Hertfordshire, and isn't just, you know, if you took the word Hertfordshire off the front, isn't just a document that could literally be from anywhere.
Councillor Dennis.
Yes. Thank you very much. I think the first question is really easy and straightforward. Thank you, Anthony, not just for the detail on the slides this evening that we couldn't really read very well because they're really teeny tiny, but also for the detailed slides and presentation last night, as well as I think there's been 2 or 3 updates with papers that you've circulated to all members as well over the last few months. Given that we've only had the benefit of the slides this evening on the screen, and I know that not all members could be present this evening, obviously, or last night, would it be possible for both slide decks to be circulated to all members? And perhaps, I don't know if we've got the capacity to create some sort of internal shared drive folder or whatever, so that members can browse documents at their leisure on this topic, because I do think that this is the most important and exciting thing that's happened to local government since 1974, which is longer than a lot of us have been alive. Looking pointedly at Councillor Munster. The second more challenging point, I think, bearing in mind, colleagues, that this is a space where we leave our political hats at the door. I heard Councillor Munster's question. And I also heard Anthony's statement that perhaps we might submit a document with an exec summary that says this council supports. A note of caution may be on the practicalities of expressing what council supports when council's vote is merely advisory, and thinking about the fact that this is a minority administration at this council. Query, as devil's advocate in this space, what is the purpose and the point of the expense on a merely advisory council meeting if Cabinet could potentially ride roughshod over what council colleagues say in that space? And perhaps there might be a warning to administration colleagues of how the politics of this thing is managed moving forwards, should there be disagreement.
So on your first question, last night's presentation is already being uploaded onto GrowZone. And we can put this one on as well, so members will be able to access it that way, and obviously we'll let you know how to find it. In terms of your wider point, I was using council in the context of council as the authority, so the authority supports this particular outcome, rather than using council to mean full council, because I recognise that whatever full council discusses could be different to what Cabinet decides. In terms of why we're going to the trouble of that debate at full council, quite simply because we recognise it's the most exciting and interesting thing to happen to local government since 1974, and we kind of figured all 51 councillors, if they're available, would probably want to talk about it.
Thank you. Councillor Chalmers.
Yes, thank you very much, Anthony, for the for last night and this evening. I think it was raised last night. When are we going to be getting more sort of figures showing the different models and outcomes? And is that sort of data and the figures going to be available for the public to be able to see, for us? I mean, when are we going to see that? Because at the moment we're seeing lots of, and I've been in the briefings, it's really good. But I think that for people to start making decisions and being able to really make proper decisions, we need to get some figures about what the different models look like and actually how that is going to impact. So could you enlighten us on that? Thank you.
So when the submission document gets published, you will obviously have access to what's included in that. I would imagine the likelihood is we're not going to be able to do anything before that, to be quite honest, because the sheer pace at which we are working, if we produced any of that now, it will be out of date by tomorrow. Ian, sorry to put you on the spot. I don't know if you've had any discussions amongst the finance work stream about when you think the financial model will be sufficiently robust and advanced to share anything. Is that something you've covered?
No, as you say, we're working rapidly on it. Had a meeting today, got another meeting tomorrow, be at least 2 or 3 meetings more next week, and more the week after, and the week after that. So we're just meeting constantly to kind of refine that model to get to a point where we are happy as CFOs it is the best it can be. It will not be a precise answer because there's so many uncertainties, and there'll be a model plus a list of uncertainties attached to it. But yeah, as Anthony says, I think we're looking at that kind of timescale of basically the end of October before we're kind of getting to the point where we can be so this is where it's going to stay and not move again.
Yeah, so at the end of October is when we're working for that document to be finalised. And in terms of when the public will have access to it, it's going to be Part 1 reports. So as soon as the papers are published, it will be available there for the public to see as well as councillors.
Okay. Councillor Billing.
Just kind of want to confirm, obviously Cabinet will be the ones putting the proposal forward, and then it's government's decision. If we put forward one thing, could they say, nah, we're going to do this, and then it doesn't really matter what full council say or Cabinet?
In simple terms, government could decide whatever it wants to do. And to use a slightly extreme example, we could put forward 3 proposals that are supported by, one proposal supported by 9 authorities, one supported by one supported by one. Government could choose, if they want to adopt one of the ones supported by just one authority. It is entirely up to them which they think is the right model going forward. Clearly, if that decision is one that some of the authorities within Hertfordshire disagree with, it is possible they could seek to challenge that decision by way of judicial review. That has been seen in other parts of the country that went through reorganisation previously. Clearly, can't predict whether that would happen. Very much depends on the decision and the reasons for it, and whether anyone is sufficiently exercised by that decision. I mentioned the elections in May 26, amongst most of the district and boroughs. If there is a change of administration in any of those, and clearly up to that point they won't have been involved, it is possible that if they feel like, well, I haven't been involved in this, I don't like it, I want to challenge it. That's not to say that they would necessarily have grounds and would necessarily be successful, but the very fact of launching a JR could delay the whole implementation timeline. And we have seen in other parts of the country, they lost months on their implementation timeline because of legal challenges. And that really caused them difficulty for that launch on day one. So, it could happen. Hopefully it won't, but who knows?
Thank you. So just to confirm, Anthony, are you suggesting that there is a deterrent to government to go against the democratically expressed wishes or executive wishes of the different councils, such that they might be put off from doing something that the district and county councils were opposed to?
Well, the deterrent is that they've got to make the decision properly. So as long as they make the decision properly, following due process and with good reasons, they can go against the majority view as long as they can justify it. And that in itself, the fact that they will know theoretically that any decision they ever make on anything can be challenged by someone. Ditto for us in terms of what we do. Any decision we make on anything could be challenged by someone at some point. So they will recognize that theoretical possibility. It's up to them to just making sure their decision-making processes are robust. And if they are robust, it will be very difficult to challenge. But I don't think they will necessarily go by weight of numbers. They will go with what they think, this is my assumption, will go with what they think best delivers on what their vision for the future of local government is.
Okay. Councillor Clyde.
Thank you. I recognise this is kind of an impossible question, so I apologise in advance. But how confident are we that we're doing our best to resolve the intrinsic chicken and egg problem, which is that people can't meaningfully give feedback on a partially filled in picture in terms of how things are going to look, but we can't fill that picture in until we know which route we're going down? How do we deal with the fact that when you're asking people in a consultation to comment on something which isn't very much fleshed out, then there's really not a lot they can say, and yet at the same time we want people to have a say, right? I mean, this is a hugely consequential change.
So yes, we absolutely want people to have a say. I'm a Cambridgeshire resident. I filled out the survey that the Cambridgeshire authorities sent around to all of the residents there. And the short answer is you have to engage more on the principles than on the detail, because that's the stage we're at. Even the submission document is broadly going to be about principles. It's not going to be saying, you know, this will be the structure of the new authority, this will be the head count, this will be the budget down to the nearest pound. It's all going to be based on a series of assumptions and principles at this point, because that's all we've got the time to do. The detail will follow after the submission.
Councillor Ward.
Yep, thank you, Joe. Just to pick up on Councillor Billing's point and the government process. So if the government wanted to go against the wishes of the combined county, etc., I think your language was the government as opposed to Parliament. So in terms of the enactment of Hertfordshire is going to look like this with its details of 2, 3, 4 and blah blah blah. It's that would be literally done by the executive government through secondary legislation and orders and stuff. It wouldn't actually go through Parliament, or is that your understanding, or do you know how that would work?
I think this is right, but I appreciate we're being recorded. Please don't quote me on this. So government makes the decision. Government then lays the legislation. That legislation needs to go through normal parliamentary process. So in theory, Parliament could decide something different to what the government wants, but looking at majority numbers, that would, one would assume, be unlikely.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Chalmers.
Yes, Anthony, you mentioned an aspect of next year, so in 2026, the local elections, whereby in some of the districts there could actually be a change of administration, which could, as you say, want to take a very different view on issues. There have been rumours, and I mean, you can't not say being able to answer this, but now I'm beginning to understand where those rumours are coming from, that those local elections in 2026 may well be, put aside, and therefore the next election will be in 27 for the shadow, and then not necessarily you have an opinion, but have you heard of any of these rumours as well?
So firstly, those rumours have not come from me, just to stress that. No, I haven't heard those rumours, and there's been nothing in any conversation I've had with MHCLG civil servants over the last few months to suggest that would be the case. In fact, quite the opposite. They're at pains to say that the 26 elections will go ahead. What would potentially be cancelled, assuming we work to the timeline set out on the final slide, is the scheduled 27 elections would be cancelled. And instead of the currently scheduled district and borough elections in 27, which I think I'm right in saying 9 of the 10 district and boroughs have elections scheduled in 27, us being the honourable exception, we're up in 28 in theory. Those 27 elections would be cancelled and would be replaced by the elections to the shadow authorities. But in terms of 26, no, not heard those rumours. MHCLG at pains to say otherwise. The other thing I forgot to mention when we talked about the timeline slide is we currently have no clarity from government as to the timeline for the creation of the strategic authority. And that is something we have put on our list of asks for government. We'll see if we get any clarity in the meeting with MHCLG tomorrow with chief execs. But within our submission document, the discussions we're having is, do we put forward a proposal for the strategic authority to be created on the same timeline as the unitaries? But that's not been finally confirmed yet. But that's, I just remembered, I forgot to mention it when we were looking at that slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really very informative. We have one more question. Oh, it was looking like a blank screen. Councillor Mansell, do go ahead.
Forgive me. And I think it's a question of which, both individuals within this room and, of course, our communities will be quite interested in. So in terms of shadow unitary authority elections, on what constituency basis are they going to occur? So are we going to see elections based on district wards? Are we going to see them on county council electoral boundaries? Are there going to be, is there potential for new boundaries? So if we could have a little bit of clarification as to that and sort of, what the submission is going to say to government on that.
In terms of what the submission will say, we haven't made any final decisions. The basis on which those elections will be held will be determined by government and will be whatever is in the structural changes order. So the structural changes order will set out whether it's wards or divisions, how many councillors there are, etc., 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 and indeed what the boundaries of the new authorities are. So that is within the gift of government. In terms of what's in our submission, we can put forward a proposal, but ultimately government could decide to do something different.
Thank you. Are we all done? Any further questions? Super. Okay, thank you so much. We don't vote on this. That was an information, and very informative it was too. I do realise we haven't offered any kind of comfort break during this this meeting. We have one last item left, which is the work programme for this committee. Would it be reasonable to say take 5 if you need it, and let's come back to that right away? So yeah, let's take 5 to 10. Yeah, 5 minutes if we can. Thank you. Are we live again? Thank you. Okay, members, is item 12, our overview and scrutiny committee work programme, and I'm going to ask Stephen Mann to present for us.
Thank you, Chair. So members are reminded and encouraged to raise items for the work programme by contacting myself, the Chair or the Vice Chair of Scrutiny. What we usually ask is for a brief summary of what the item is going to be and a description as to why you think it should be investigated, and any additional information like evidence or any impacts. That kind of information helps us to take it into consideration and do any further investigations with officers. We're currently developing a form to be able to aid you in kind of submitting those requests, and that will be sent out in the near future. So at today's meeting, we were supposed to have the town centre strategy and the museum storage items. Unfortunately, due to various reasons, these items have been deferred, and their detailed explanations can be found in the supplementary documents. Please contact me once you've had a read of them if you require any further information, and I will coordinate that with officers. With regards to Section 106 task and finish groups, members of the task and finish group met on Wednesday, 16th of July to draft the consultation questions. These have now been compiled into a questionnaire, which have been reviewed by members, and the final questionnaire will be circulated to stakeholders for response within the coming weeks. We also have another meeting coming up for task and finish group, and that'll be on Tuesday, 30th of September, where members will meet with the strategic planning officers to address any questions with regards to the scope and S106 obligations. You'll note that the LGA peer review item has now been removed from our report, and that's because all actions have now been completed on that. With regards to the decision and monitoring tracker, that was not included in this report because there were no decisions to be monitored at this meeting. That's all, Chair.
Thank you very much. So thank you, thank you, Jeevan, for that. And you will remember as well, members, that I emailed in the summer recess with a kind of further request. If you have items for inclusion in the work programme, do please raise them. And I also suggested that we discuss the crime and disorder issues for the Hertfordshire Constabulary to address when they come to committee in January. So I've had one comment on that, and I will come to that a little bit later. But but first of all, are there any items that members would like to include or would like to address the scheduling of at this outset?
Just to sort of speak with respect to the Section 106 task and finish report, I think at this stage we haven't made as much progress as perhaps one would have liked. Now, that is obviously for a whole host of different reasons. It's important that we get things right first and foremost. And on that basis, I think it probably be more realistic for that potentially to be reported in February. It gives us an additional month. As our scrutiny officer has said, we are engaging with meetings at the end of the month. We will be making progress with respect to that. There have been delays with respect to the consultation, and unfortunately, because of the process surrounding LGR, I know our communications team are very keen to make sure that we're not overburdening people with respect to consultations, which I think is fair enough, because we do want people to engage. So on that basis, we are going to be extending the consultation period so we're able to get as much information as possible. But on that basis, it would be appropriate for us to put that for report in February as opposed to January next year.
Thank you. Can I just advise, do we need to propose and second the recommendations before we move to this debate, or are we happy to just have a conversation about it? No. Okay, that's cool. So obviously Jeevan mentioned that we have had a number of items slip from meeting to meeting so far in this committee, and for a number of different reasons. I think we have in each case we have had a report from the director or officer in charge. but these things will come, I just want to assure you that these will come back onto the programme as soon as they can. We wanted to look, I think, firstly at November, where that's looking like if you look at your, looking at the schedule, that's looking like quite a chunky meeting. And if we get some slippage, some of the items that have slipped from previous meetings into that will become unmanageable. So we want to propose to move some things out which are not time specific, so not tied to decision points or key decisions that are outlined in the forward plan. So the director update on health equalities was a member request rather than being tied to a key decision. So that one could, I think, reasonably move to January. The effectiveness of the council tax reduction scheme is tied to a key decision, and so I would suggest that one should stay. We do want to interrogate carefully whether that is working to support and protect some of our most vulnerable residents. The local plan, the leisure contract, also, I think, tied to key decisions. So possibly only in the environmental health item, which might be feasibly moved to January. Am I right? Yeah. So those are the two things we're proposing to move to the subsequent meeting. Is everybody comfortable with that? Does anybody have any? Sorry, Councillor Ward.
Yeah, sorry, I was just about to answer your question. I guess
Please do.
My question would be, what do we think the timing is of the matters that have been deferred from tonight? Because whilst we might want to cover them at the next one in November, it's not realistic to. I mean, it's already 10:20, and we only did a couple tonight. So I'm just conscious of, do we know when the right point to do those would be? But I would support what you said about taking the two out.
Well, the explanations in the supplement to the agenda list the town centre strategy is going to be that they are presenting that at November prior to cabinet. So that would be time specific. I think it's only just missed the window for this, I believe. And then the museum storage item, that note doesn't actually give a timeline specifically, but we know that is moving forward, and I believe the decision point for that isn't until the new year, so we could let that one move because we would have another opportunity to address that. So yeah, there's not as much detail, I would say, in the deferral of the museum storage item in terms of understanding where that would fit in the next fit in our schedule.
I'll have to go away and check the local plan one.
Thank you.
What that one's thinking into. There's a key decision point around that.
Okay.
So that could move.
Okay. Well, that would give us a little bit more space. I completely agree. We want to do a good job of these items. We don't want to stuff the agenda. January is looking lighter, or certainly light enough to accept another item or two, but we will have the delivery plan Q2 update, piece on community safety. We've agreed that the task and finish report will move to the February, and then there's the Hertfordshire Constabulary report. So we do have space to absorb at least 2, or if not 3 items into that one there. Are there any further questions on that? Ms. Cooper?
Yeah, so I just wanted to provide some clarity on the CTRS, Council Tax Reduction Scheme item. Whilst if we were going to make changes to it, the key decision point would be around about November time. We do have to go to public consultation first, so we're not planning on making any significant changes to it this year. So there is no real key decision point because I haven't gone through that consultation process yet. So happy at some point for you to look at the CTRS scheme, but I would say it's probably not time critical in that respect. So it could be one you could look to defer. I would also point out, because we've mentioned LGR enough this evening, at some point we will need to look at alignment of CTRS schemes across whoever is part of a grouping with us going forward, and therefore we may not make too many more changes to CTRSs in the short term. We may do, but yeah, that is an active discussion around Chief Finance Officer at the moment around how we move to that going forward.
So that is less critically tied to that particular meeting as well. Okay, well, that's really helpful. Thank you so much. Other, Councillor Munster, did you want to come in?
I did, in terms of just suggesting an item for the agenda, because, and I'd be very, very interested to hear what colleagues have to say as to sort of when they would deem it appropriate for this item to be before this committee. But the waste contract implementation, I know obviously, it's been a very, very big change for our residents moving to the new waste contract and to the new rota system. I am aware that we have a number of teething problems, and I'm just sort of wanting to understand from colleagues potentially when they feel it might be appropriate for us to look into this, whether or not it may be after a set period of implementation as opposed to sort of the teething problems that we've currently got, or whether sort of, we want to look in the immediate term at those issues. But very, very interested to hear what colleagues have to say.
Councillor Clayton, we were talking about this before the meeting, weren't we?
Yeah, so I mean, as we discussed when we were looking at the council delivery plan, we don't have the various data points relating to the waste contract. But once we do, I would have thought that that would be a good time to look at it. My inclination on that would be to see essentially how things go over the next month or so, and whether we have access to the relevant data, and whether it seems like something that we can usefully input on. Obviously it's still a fairly hot topic, it's still very live, and there are still a number of issues being worked through. Whether it's something that we can make useful contribution to, I think we probably need to keep evaluating, and I think we should keep open the possibility that we include that in November. But I think it's probably, for the time being, we sort of just keep it as a maybe, would be my suggestion.
Forgive me. And you have to forgive me if this was something which we covered earlier. It has been a few hours now. But would any of our officers be able to assist as to when that potential data may be available to help us make an informed inquiry into the implementation of this new waste contract? I appreciate it is neither of your directors.
No, but we can certainly take that away to relevant parties and come back to you. I believe that Sarah Kingsley has come to, well, she's written to me to say that they will be taking this to East Herts in November's meeting, so we can find out if they have some data already, and discuss that and triage it accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That would be great. And I think I agree with Councillor Clayton. I think it's quite right that as soon as we get the data, we get it on the schedule. Councillor Ward, do you want to?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the timing of that one, because a 6-monthly review would actually be February, start of February, which, although it might feel like a bit like long grass, might be enough time to have a bit of a look at it in the round. And the data might be available. I think there was a grace period on this SLAs and things with the contractor to give them some time to get up to speed. Well, not too fast, they'll run people over, but I can't remember what that was. I think it was a few months. So it's like, if you had that, then you had the data collection. It might be that by that sort of point, they should be operating under the proper regime, as it were. So I don't know, but maybe that's one for officers to take away and just confirm what the timing looks like of that and when we want to look at it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we have got those two slightly different issues, haven't we? Is it, are we scrutinising how well the rollout went, in which case doing it quite soon while the issues are fresh, and while there's still scope to influence how they might be resolved, as opposed to that 6-month review where we might, have we got to a point where we are, it is now business as usual and everything is largely ironed out, and what are we scrutinising at that point? Is it then, are we then looking back and saying, well, it did or didn't go well, but we've lost the opportunity to say anything about it? So I would be interested in members' direction on that. Councillor Munster?
Whilst people are sort of warming up, I'll start us off, shall I? No, in terms of when we should be doing this, I think sooner rather than later. I completely hear and understand and think there is merit in the points of which Councillor Ward have just raised, but this is a service of which impacts every single resident of which we represent, and if we have the opportunity to invoke some change that will deliver more positive outcomes for how that service is delivered to our residents, then certainly I think we need to be grabbing that with both hands.
Thank you, Councillor Munster. Any further comment on topics for November, shall we say? What I'd like to do then is just move to the crime and disorder issues, and Hertfordshire Constabulary have requested questions in advance, and particularly if there's any particular topic, any particular aspect of crime and disorder that we would like to address, policing generally. Can I invite Councillor Chalmers to just talk about his suggestion?
Well, as many of you will probably know, that Hertfordshire Police has decided to withdraw all visible support for LGBT pride. Now, there seems to be a little bit of confusion going on here, whether or not it's the rainbow flag or whether it's a progress flag. But basically, it is a step which should be of real concern at a time when trust amongst for the LGBT community with the police is not at its strongest, shall we say, and therefore I think that some of the questions we should be asking around sort of reporting of hate crime, in particular LGBT hate crime, but also other hate crime, and whether I mean, I'm hearing, for instance, that stats are showing that actually that LGBT hate crime is going down, but that's probably because people are not reporting it. Whereas there are independent charities that have done their own sort of research and consultation in Hertfordshire. One that I've heard of that I was told over the last few months, I think they interviewed about sort of 50 members of the community. 77% of them have said that in the last 3 months that they've experienced some form of abuse, how that's put. So we need to sort of put to the police, and we need to be asking them their decision to actually withdraw support, how that actually figures with what we're actually experiencing in the community. There's also a question that I would like to ask around the incident at what's it called? Is it Mully Malone's in Hitchin? I'm not going to go into details about that. I think it was reported in the press, but I want to know what the police are actually doing, in particular in that area. As Hertfordshire Police is one of the first police forces in the country that have actually taken this decision. So I think that a lot of the country police forces have decided they're not going to. Hertfordshire, we can go into the reasons why they have, but I think we really do need to ask some very pertinent questions of who would be the chief constable that would come here, because that seems to be where the decision has been made. Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Munster.
I think I hear what Councillor Chambers is saying, and I certainly don't mean to diminish the importance of the issues of which he's talking about. But I think in the round, we need to consider the appropriateness of the forum of which we're talking about these issues. Now, the decision by Hertfordshire Constabulary, and forgive me, I'm not fully read up or briefed on this matter, but what I would say is I don't think it's necessarily appropriate for this forum in North Herts to discuss that matter. This issue is not one of which is, or this policy will not have been taken at a local level by local inspectors and by the local chief inspector. It is one of which will have been taken by headquarters. And therefore, I would submit that actually it's probably a more appropriate forum for these questions to be asked at the Police and Crime Panel, which scrutinises the policy of the Police and Crime Commissioner and holds the Chief Constable to account, because that is, as Councillor Chambers has already alluded to, that is more likely to be the case of who has taken that decision. With respect to sort of the case surrounding Molly Malone, I don't know the specific issue, but I think it's important that, you know, if we're sort of seeing a trend in North Hertfordshire of type of crime of which is taking place in certain locations, then of course that's the appropriate forum for it here. But if it's a specific case, then potentially sort of contacting the local officers would be a more appropriate avenue to receive that response. In terms of sort of a topic for the constabulary, potentially we could look at the work of which is done with officers at North Herts District Council, with councillors and with the community more widely, to sort of understand what work has been undertaken and potentially sort of, you know, support the constabulary in building those community bridges with, you know, communities right across the district.
Thank you. Councillor Clayton.
Thank you. I mean, with respect to Councillor Munster, I think these issues affect people everywhere in the county. They don't, irrespective of where the decision is made. The fact is that they have impacts everywhere, and that includes in North Herts. And trying to get to the impacts of these kinds of decisions locally, that seems entirely pertinent to me. Perhaps the scope could be broadened to look at hate crime of all kinds, rather than it being entirely focused specifically on hate crime that's connected to LGBT issues. But I don't see, this doesn't seem out of scope to me. I think if we've discussed particular crimes in the area, then I don't see why we couldn't look at, which we have in the past, I believe. I don't see any reason why we couldn't look at hate crime.
And Councillor Billing.
I was actually pretty much going to voice pretty much exactly the same as what Councillor Clayton just said, but also that, yeah, I think everyone here, at least in this council, are progressive in that we want to know these things and we're not going to shy and hide away from wanting to know that information.
Thank you. Councillor Chalmers, did you want to come back?
Yeah, I was just going to say what others have said, but I think that decisions that have been taken are impacting and are going to impact upon the community, and therefore we need to be able to ask those questions of the police for our community. That's what we're here for.
Thank you. I think I would also add that they've got until January to ask. If the decision was made someone else, they can get a report and they can come back to us with an explanation. We may be a constituent part of that particular governance structure, but we're still part of it. Councillor Ward.
Yeah, thank you. One potential avenue for the police, I think, would be a matter. It came up in Southern Rural when we had an update from one of the local team, was around burglaries and domestic burglaries, and I think generally the trends actually seem potentially favourable, but certainly I know what we've seen with some specific trends in our area has been more sophisticated, more organised, technically equipped criminals committing domestic burglaries at more scale and more sophistication. So this is not just your sort of random person. It's much more organised crime, basically. So I would have thought that might be a more systemic topic to have the police talk about from a bigger picture point of view, how they're tackling organised crime gangs focused on both burglaries and other crime across the district and the county.
Thank you very much. I mean, obviously we can ask as many things as we like. Obviously we'll get a longer report the more things we ask. Hate crime with reference to LGBTQ and other minority groups. Domestic burglary, increased sophistication and scale, particularly referencing. I like that we're referencing particular events and particular incidents in both cases. I think that speaks to that connection with our residents' genuine experience and not just asking something for the sake of it. Councillor Billing, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think another question that I would like to know is if there's any particular trends in crimes and how that compares to last year.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Chalmers.
If we're asking about so cybercrime as well, because I think that is that I found in other areas where the police have been reporting, we're talking about burglaries and that, but actually that cybercrime against certainly amongst more vulnerable elderly residents, and it's not reported in the same way. So they may need to go and have a look to see where else that has been reported. But I know that it is that certain police forces have put up special task forces to actually deal with this. So the sort of people being faked into giving away money and whatever. So that sort of issue. Yeah. Right, my brain's not thinking.
Scams and frauds.
Yeah, do you know the fraud, online fraud, and
I think
thank you.
A great topic. And I can see Councillor Munster.
I just want to say, look, colleagues obviously have raised a broad number of subjects. From previous experience on this committee, when we have invited the police in to talk about crime and disorder, we have generally done a deep dive into a particular issue. Last year, I think we did hate crime. The year before that, I think it was violence against women and girls, and I can't remember the other topics. The risk is that if we sort of, talk about all of these different topics, we're not necessarily going to be able to get that depth. So ultimately, the committee needs to decide, does it want breadth or depth from the police?
Sure, no, that's very true. Councillor Bartwas, sorry, Councillor.
What we said at the beginning, the actual LGBT, and we know there is a real issue here and a potential problem with Herts Police and what could happen to Hertfordshire. So that would be my suggestion.
And Councillor Bartwas?
Yeah, I think all of the issues that have been raised are really important. And I also want to know about this policy to do with support for LGBT people. But I did want to raise one more thing, which is antisocial behaviour in the context of kind of our most vulnerable residents, people living in social housing. And I don't know whether that is one necessarily for the police or whether that's an internal one for the council or something joint. But I do think, given how often antisocial behaviour in the context of social housing comes up in casework, it does need to be looked at.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Billing?
Sorry to drag this on. I just know that a lot of us have a lot of questions, as we always will. And I agree with David Chalmers that I think it should be about LGBTQ+. I think that is a real relevant thing at the moment for everything that's happening in the world. And the questions that we've raised, if they can maybe even still answer them, but it could be in written text rather than...
Exactly what I was going to suggest. These are questions that we have that we want answers to, but we could request a deep dive on the LGBT and hate crime issue with some notes on and data on some of the other issues that we've raised. And I think it's just fair to give them a heads up about the things that are we're interested in hearing about, because we can always ask these questions in person on the night as well. Thank you, everybody. So do we have any further questions on this? Shall we just move to debate and vote on the recommendations, which I think we've covered really well. Thank you so much for your engagement with this. So the recommendations are 2.1, that the committee prioritises topics for inclusion in the work programme attached as Appendix A, and where appropriate determines the high-level form and timing of scrutiny input. 2.2, that the committee, having considered the most recent iteration of the forward plan as attached at Appendix B, suggests a list of items to be considered at meetings in the coming civic year. May I please have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Bartwas, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Chalmers. Shall we move to the vote then?
That motion is carried, Chair. Thank you.
That draws our meeting to a close. A reminder that we meet again as this committee on the 11th of November. And yeah, keep an eye on your email and I will circulate anything else that comes up in the interim. See you then.
Got a request.
Oh yeah, hello. Councillor Ward?
Sorry, Chair, just probably one thing for the to raise with the officers. A eagle-eyed member of one of our parish councils just pointed out to me that they've been watching on YouTube, believe it or not, I think the title of the overview and scrutiny committee that's on the YouTube channel says 9th of September 2026. They could also, they're asking for the lottery results, I think, as well. So you might want to sort that out and correct it. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
For that. Round. Yeah. They get going. Good. No, I was a bit worried about that. But I thought let them move around a bit first.